Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The UNICEF Hong Kong Reimagine Education International Forum 2022 will begin shortly. Please be seated. 各位嘉宾，活动即将开始，请各位就座。Before we begin, may I remind you to kindly switch all your mobile phones and electronic devices to vibrant or silent mode. 请把你们的手提电话或者是任何的响闹装置调到静音模式。谢谢你们的合作。English will be used throughout our forum. For guests who would like to listen to simultaneous interpretation in Mandarin or Cantonese, there are headsets at the SI counter, which is located at the back of this room, or please raise your hand, and our staff will bring one to you immediately. 今天我们的活动将会以英语进行。假如大家需要即时传译服务，请到我们会场后方索取耳机，或者是请你可以举手示意，我们工作人员将会提供协助。Channel 1 is for English, Channel 2 for Cantonese, 頻道2廣東話 Channel 3 for 普通話，頻道3普通話。Thank you for your cooperation. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin, may I remind you to please kindly switch all your mobile phone and electronic devices to vibrant or silent mode. 喺呢個時候，有請大家將你哋嘅手提電話以及任何響鬧裝置調至靜音。有請大家把你們的手提電話以及任何的響鬧裝置調到靜音模式。謝謝你們的合作。English will be used throughout our forum. For guests who would like to listen to simultaneous interpretation in Mandarin or Cantonese, there are headsets at the SI counter, which is located at the back of this room. Or you may raise your hand and our staff will bring you one immediately. 今天我们的活动将会以英语进行。假如需要即时传译服务，请到我们会场后方索取耳机，或请舉手示意，我們的工作人員將會提供協助。今日我哋嘅活動將會以英語進行，假如需要即時傳譯，可以去到我哋會場後方索取耳機，又或者可以舉手示意，我哋嘅工作人員會即時協助。Channel 1 is for English. Channel 2 for Cantonese. 頻道2係廣東話。Channel 3 for 普通話。頻道3普通話。謝謝。 Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. May I now invite all of you to please stand and observe a minute of silence in tribute to the memory of His Excellency, Mr. Jiang Zemin, the former President of the People's Republic of China. 现在有请各位起立，默哀1分钟，悼念中华人民共和国前国家主席江泽民先生。默哀完毕 ，Please be seated， 请各位就坐。Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, distinguished speakers. Thank you for joining us today. I am Esther Chen, your MC of today. The Hong Kong Committee for UNICEF is proud to present today's forum. This is a high-level platform for eminent leaders and speakers from Hong Kong and around the globe to discuss how we may strengthen the preparedness and resilience of our education for the benefits of every child in the post-COVID world. And now, may I introduce all of our officiating guests. 首先，请允许我介绍我们今天的主礼嘉宾 Ms. Judy Chen, Chairman, the Hong Kong Committee for UNICEF. Mr. Zhang Qihua, Director of the Youth Department at Liaison Office, the Central People's Government in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. 张志华先生，中央人民政府驻香港特别行政区联络办公室青年部部长。Mr. Wang Qi, Director General of the Department of International Organizations and Conferences, the Office of the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. 王琦先生，中华人民共和国外交部驻香港特别行政区特派员公署国际组织部主任，你好。Mr. Edward Tu, Deputy Secretary for Education, the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. Mr. Tu. Mr. Ivan Chu, UNICEF Hong Kong Reimagine Education International Forum Organizing Committee Co-Chair and Advocacy Committee Chair. And also Mrs. Bonnie Lee, UNICEF Hong Kong Reimagine Education International Forum Organizing Committee Co-Chairs and Fundraising Committee Chair. Thank you. So now we would like to have a group photo before the forum starts. So, ladies and gentlemen, please have a look at our official photographer on stage. 好，我们在我们今天的论坛开始之前，我们有请所有的嘉宾先看一下我们台上的摄影師，我們一起記錄下美好的開始。好啦，有請所有嘅嘉賓，我哋面向台上面嘅大會攝影師，我哋影一幅相，去記錄我哋今日美好嘅開始。Thank you everyone. Today we are honored by the presence of our guest of honor, officiating guests and guest speakers with us to commemorate this meaningful event. Although not all are available to join us in person today, some of them would like to contribute to today's forum through pre-recorded videos. Let us hear from our esteemed guests who come from different countries and backgrounds, their voices and perspectives in regard to post-COVID education globally. And now it is my honor to introduce the first video recorded by the Honorable Leung Chun-ying, GBM GBSJP, Vice Chairman of the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference and Honorary Council Member of Hong Kong Committee for UNICEF. Please have a look.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to join you at the UNICEF Hong Kong Reimagine Education International Forum 2022. Let me first extend my warmest welcome to speakers and participants from the mainland of China and from overseas. Throughout history, the Chinese people always place the utmost emphasis on education, both formal school education and family education. During my term as Chief Executive of the Hong Kong SAR between 2012 and 2017, education accounted for about 20% of total public expenditure, which was the highest among all policy areas. We regarded these expenditure as investments in the people of Hong Kong and therefore the future of Hong Kong. We wanted to start these investments early, hence extending free education to the 3 years in kindergarten, giving Hong Kong youngsters free and quality education over 15 years. I realized that the Hong Kong model may not be affordable elsewhere, and under the prolonged pandemic, school closures in many parts of the world has brought significant impact on children's academic and social developments. Without skills for lifelong learning, children may face greater barriers to expressing their full potential and career development later in life. They are also more likely to have inhibited people skills. UNICEF works in over 190 countries and territories worldwide to support vulnerable children. In 2021, $802 million were spent across 147 countries to support UNICEF programs on equitable access to education. As a result, 48.6 million out-of-school children were able to gain access to education, in which about half are girls. Here in Hong Kong, UNICEF Hong Kong rolled out For Every Child Hygiene and For Every Child Care and Relief campaigns during the COVID-19 outbreak. The campaigns have provided anti-epidemic emergency support for low-income households, including learning materials, rapid antigen self-testing kits, food and sanitizing supplies, to underprivileged families with children and pregnant women, as well as raising awareness of mental health issues of children. These actions speak well of the tireless efforts that UNICEF Hong Kong has made in caring for children and protecting their rights to a fairer and better future. Ladies and gentlemen, society is slowly entering the post-COVID era and embracing the new normal. We need to have a clear blueprint on education and get ourselves well prepared for our children's development. The landscape for tomorrow's learning is never solely about absorbing knowledge. Going forward, education is more about the organic organization of knowledge across the various disciplines in life and the comprehensive development of the new generation. Today's forum provides a great platform for experts from the various sectors to share experiences and ideas and to shed light on the future development strategies of education. Soon in the keynote sessions and the panel discussions with such themes as post-COVID education, mental resilience development, beyond formal education, and TJX Tech, we will have the opportunity to inspire one another on best practices in education, helping children and young people to thrive on problem solving, creativity, and innovation. Dedication has brought us together. I wish you all a very rewarding and fruitful forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leung. May we now hear from Ms. Chen Shou-rong, former secretary of the leading party members group, vice president and members of Secretariat of All China Women's Federation, and president of China Children and Teenagers Fund on her views towards education.
各位来宾、朋友们，很荣幸通过视频方式参加重塑教育国际论坛。在此，我谨代表中国儿童少年基金会，对联合国儿童基金香港委员会成立35周年表示热烈的祝贺，向联合国儿童基金香港委员会35年来对儿童事业发展所做出的积极贡献表示敬佩和敬意，向包括曾经主席在内的香港各界爱心人士对中国儿童慈善事业的倾心支持和爱心奉献表示衷心感谢，向各位来宾朋友们致以亲切的问候和美好的祝愿。儿童是人类的未来和希望，教育是儿童拥有可持续发展能力的根本途径，推动儿童享有公平、包容、更高质量的教育，是我们共同的努力方向。今年9月，联合国召开的教育变革峰会提出教育变革愿景和行动倡议，为教育可持续发展提振信心和动力。中国党和政府一直把教育作为国之大计，把儿童放在国家优先发展的战略位置，先后制定实施了4个周期的中国儿童发展纲要。前不久，中国共产党第20次全国代表大会顺利召开。习近平总书记在20大报告中明确指出，坚持教育优先发展，办好人民满意的教育，着力培养担当民族大任的时代新人，充分体现了中国共产党对教育事业的高度重视，为儿童健康成长、全面发展提供了强有力的保障。中国儿童少年基金会是1981年成立的新中国第一家国家级公益基金会，41年来，党和国家高度重视，在全国妇联的领导下，中国儿童少年基金会坚持儿童优先原则，汇聚海内外中华儿女国际友人的爱心力量，培育了春雷计划等一批具有影响力的公益项目，累计筹集社会资金65亿元，为5000多万名的儿童铺就了健康之路、求学之路、成才之路，致力于改善贫困家庭女童受教育状况的春雷计划公益项目，自1989年实施以来，紧贴女童多元发展需求，不断拓展工作领域和服务内容，建立了以助学圆梦为重点及素质教育、素质教育、青春期健康教育、安全教育为一体的综合教育支柱体系。截至目前，春雷计划已为408万人次女童提供助学帮扶，帮助一大批困境女童成长为教师、医生、工程师、公务员等，使他们拥有了平等参与经济社会发展的能力，为促进女童教育发展做出了积极的贡献。特别使我们备受鼓舞的是，联合国教科文组织促进女童和妇女教育特使彭丽媛2014年担任春雷计划促进女童教育特使以来，为女童教育发展倾心付出。2019年启动春雷计划梦想未来行动。2021年第10个国际女童日之际，发出倡议，号召大家行动起来，积极为春雷计划梦想未来行动提升推进工作贡献力量，让更多女童受到良好教育，实现人生梦想，拥有美好未来。 各位来宾、朋友们，当前我们正处于世界百年未有之大变局和世纪疫情叠加影响的特殊时期，儿童教育与发展面临着不容忽视的挑战。中国儿童少年基金会愿同香港同胞、同国际友好组织、友好人士一道，积极推动学校、家庭、社会协同育人，汇聚更多社会爱心力量，更好推动儿童慈善事业发展，为儿童教育事业赴人加油，让每个儿童拥有更加美好的未来。预祝重塑教育国际论坛圆满成功。谢谢大家。
Thank you, Ms. Chan. Ms. Chan mentioned in her speech that children are the future pillars of society. Whether they are rich or poor, their physical and mental development must not be overlooked. Promoting equitable and high-quality education for children is the key to the development of the next generation. And also, it is the direction that all parties should strive for. The last video is brought to us by Mr. Vuk Jeremic, President of the 67th United Nations General Assembly and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Serbia from 2007 to 2012.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is a distinct honor for me to address the Reimagine Education International Forum 2022 and humbly offer to you my thoughts on the future of education in these turbulent times. Let me start by commending the selfless work of the Hong Kong Committee for UNICEF under the dynamic leadership of my dear friend, Judy Chen, encouraging them to continue with their valorous all-round efforts. Back in 1948, the UN General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This landmark document mandated that primary education be compulsory, technical and professional education generally available, and higher education equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. Until this day, the United Nations has rightfully sought to promote the indispensability of this key instrument of human progress. In my capacity as the 67th President of the UN General Assembly, I invited Malala Yousafzai to address the United Nations Youth Assembly, her first public remark since surviving a barbaric attack by extremists, because of her vivid quest to receive proper education. Together with the UN Special Envoy for Global Education, Gordon Brown, and the then Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, we have sent a strong appeal to redouble planetary efforts to achieve universal school enrollment. Today, the global environment continues to be affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Schools closure around the world has disrupted the education of a whole generation of students. There is a serious risk that COVID-19 would wipe out several decades of progress in addressing poverty, gender equality, and education. If we do not act swiftly, a report by the UN's Global Education First initiative concludes, educational disparities will become an even greater source of division, both within and between countries. This could have disastrous human, social, and economic consequences. It would undermine our efforts to end hunger, empower women, and save children and mothers from premature deaths, as well as undercut our ambition to live in greater harmony with the environment. We need to act swiftly, for otherwise hundreds of millions of children would be at risk of losing hope for their future. Today, despite all our political differences, we need to be united in ensuring that no child is stopped from going to school. Factors like geography, gender, disability, language, wealth, and ethnicity must not be impediments to this achievement. Education helped me overcome the hardships that my family and I faced throughout the 1990s, a profoundly challenging period for my country. I will never forget that generous people whom I did not know at that time came to my aid and enabled me to acquire knowledge from the world's most prominent schools. The only thing they sought from me in return was to help others in the future In a similar way, they had helped me. Therefore, it is my duty to lend my wholehearted support to this existential human endeavor. Ladies and gentlemen, as we reflect on our future steps, let us draw inspiration from the words of one of the world's greatest statesmen, Nelson Mandela, a heroic figure whose political legacy and moral weight has left a lasting mark on our times. Education, he said, is the most powerful weapon to change the world. It is indeed. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremich, Mr. Leung, and Ms. Chan for their meaningful speeches to set the precedent for our forum today. Without further ado, may we now invite Chairman of the Hong Kong Committee for UNICEF, Ms. Judy Chan, to deliver the welcome message. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Judy Chan.
Edward, distinguished guests, friends of UNICEF, educators, and change makers, our young friends, welcome to our today's event. As we're sitting here at this Hong Kong Palace Museum and attending today's event, I'm also pleased to welcome all enthusiastic participants worldwide that are sitting every corner of the world right now. Join us. Are you ready? Is our next generation ready for this fast-changing world? It is a known fact that the world was already facing a learning crisis before COVID. But the pandemic has made it a bad situation, much worse, and harmed the learning of more than 90% of the world's children. The largest disruption in history. In 2021, 244 million children and young people were out of school. Studies show that up to 70% of the children in poor countries are unable to read a basic text at age 10. And nearly half of all students do not complete secondary school, and a full 700 million adults are illiterate, the majority of whom are women. Today's education challenges are staring at us in the face. It is our duties to give children a fair chance to live up to their full potential. It is our mission to make future generations ready for what lies ahead. To achieve this goal, we must rise to the occasion here and now. We must reimagine education together. When I look around, I see so many scholars, specialists, policymakers, business leaders, social leaders here are in this room. Although we come from different backgrounds, specialized and excel in various fields, live and work in all corners of the world, there's one thing we all share in common, that is our passion for education. Since the establishment of Hong Kong Committee for UNICEF 35 years ago, education is the heart and soul of our advocacy and community service initiatives. Our long-running Young Envoys program has nurtured more than 1,400 young leaders since 1996. Some of them will be sharing their takeaways and growth journeys through a short video today. And UNICEF Club is a school-based, student-led platform that promotes global citizenship. In response to the pandemic, we rolled out a comprehensive array of new initiatives that include For Every Child Care and Relief community support campaign that will care about 7,500 vulnerable families in the grassroots society. But the philosophy and education never stops. When all schools were closed due to the fifth wave of COVID, we launched SDGs e-Learned award scheme that empowered more than 2,200 participant students to contribute to United Nations Sustainable Development Goal through online courses and creative everyday action they carry out at home. To build a participation platform for our children and teenagers, we could produce For Every Child We Listen radio, 24集嘅兒童電台, which is accomplished, and TV programs, which now is just broadcasting right now, 8 series of 兒童電視. We give a platform to children to let them use their voice to speak out their own stories. And today's forum is, of course, another testament to UNICEF HK steadfast commitment to education. If we want to rise above post-COVID education challenges together, we must look at learning's education from a fresh perspective and turn seemingly dead ends into new pathways to success. I wish UNICEF Hong Kong Reimagine Education International Forum 2022 can be a springboard for education transformation. To do that, we must first evaluate the situation, the education challenges, and seek transformational opportunities to support the post-COVID area. Keynote speech by Mr. Andrea Schlascher, Director of the OECD, would be a guiding light that points the way for us to move forward. And furthermore, we will shed new lights on 3 pillars of the transformational opportunities throughout the panel discussions during today's forum. Our eminent leaders and speakers will share their insights on the topics of mental resilient development, beyond formal education, and tech and teach. There's no doubt that education is the key to unlocking the unlimited potential of this generation of children, just like how education has brought positive challenges to the life of every person attending today's forum. 今天是一个非常特别的日子，也是一个沉重的日子。我们缅怀江泽民总书记。我记得江总书记曾经来港4次，而每一次呢，他不单单是关心香港的民生，也是非常的关心香港的青少年儿童的福祉。在这个特别的纪念他的日子里面啊，我觉得今天的活动会非常有意义。我也希望我们能够化悲痛为力量，在将来呢，共同携手为儿童的福利做出一番贡献。谢谢大家 ，Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chan. We are honored to have the Chief Executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, the Honorable Mr. John Lee, as our esteemed guest. However, the Honorable Mr. John Lee is unavailable today due to other engagements. He has very kindly pre-recorded his messages to convey.
Ms. Judy Chan, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the Reimagine Education International Forum 2022 today marks the 35th anniversary of the Hong Kong Committee for UNICEF. Let me first extend my warmest welcome to all participants and esteemed speakers, especially guests from overseas, for your participation at this meaningful event. I would also like to express my gratitude to the Hong Kong Committee for UNICEF for organizing this forum, which sets the stage for leaders and professionals to share insights on how we could strengthen the preparedness and resilience of education for the benefits of each and every child. Hong Kong attaches great importance to education. We firmly believe in the concepts of education for all and education for life. Education has always been among the top priorities of our public expenditure, accounting for some 18% of the total recurrent budget. We provide 12 years of free education preceded by subsidized kindergarten education. Beyond that, around 80% of our children have access to post-secondary education. Education for all, an ideology propounded by Confucius centuries ago, is well respected and widely practiced in Hong Kong. We provide ample opportunities for children to receive quality education, irrespective of their financial means, educational needs, and abilities. The COVID-19 pandemic has inevitably disrupted normal schooling, but we have all along strived to ensure that no one is left behind. We also firmly believe education must move with the times amidst rapid technological advancement. E-learning has become more popular now than ever. Schools have tailored innovative teaching and learning strategies to support students to learn at home. Under our pragmatic anti-epidemic strategy, schools are gradually resuming full-day classes in an orderly manner. As outlined in my policy address, we will strengthen Hong Kong's education system on 3 fronts: unleashing the potential of students, improving the effectiveness of teaching and learning, and creating strong impetus for growth. To set a firm foundation for innovation and technology in our city, Hong Kong will step up the promotion of STEAM education for all, for fun, and for diversity. More learning elements of INT will be incorporated into the curriculum. Schools are expected to implement enriched coding education at upper primary level and artificial intelligence in the junior secondary curriculum. STEAM education will take place both within and beyond the classroom, and students will have plenty of opportunities to participate in quality STEAM activities. Hong Kong values partnership and collaboration with educational professionals and leaders from all over the world. I'm confident that today's forum will shed new light on the development of education in the new era. On that note, I wish the forum a resounding success and all participants a most fruitful and insightful experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. And next, we would like to invite Mr. Wang Qi, Director General of the Department of International Organizations and Conferences at the Office of the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Hong Kong SAR, to give us a speech. 现在我们就有请中华人民共和国外交部驻香港特别行政区特派员公署国际组织部主任王琦先生为我们致辞，有请。
Madam Chairman, Judy Chen, 志华部长, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. At the outset, please let me extend my warmest congratulations to the convening of the Reimagine Education International Forum 2022, hosted by Hong Kong Committee for UNICEF. It's my honor to speak at the opening session on behalf of the Office of the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Hong Kong. Since its establishment, UNICEF Hong Kong has done a great job for the well-being of children around the world. Particularly for this year's UNICEF Hong Kong, under the leadership of my dear friend, Chairman Judy Chen, has been making very useful and active explorations and efforts despite of the epidemic, including fundraising, advocating for voices, and holding various activities in communities and on campus, which achieved great results, especially with respect to the learning and the mental health of the children as well as young people in Hong Kong. Education is a fundamental right and an important opportunity for every single human being, and is the key to improve the livelihood of children and young people. However, the prolonged pandemic posed huge challenges to the children in regard to the education and the lives as a whole. UNICEF Hong Kong Reimagine Education International Forum is held at the right time. It is my firm belief that with the expertise and wisdom of these distinguished panelists from all over the world, this forum will bring us expected fruitful outcomes and generate new prospects for children's post-COVID education. Ladies and gentlemen, President Xi Jinping proposed the Global Development Initiative at the General Assembly of the United Nations last year. The GDI puts development first and the people at the center, and it seeks to expedite the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. 1 year on, the GDI has enjoyed the support of over 100 countries and many international organizations, including the United Nations. And China has always maintained a sound relationship with UNICEF and highly values its cooperation. China is willing to work with UNICEF to accelerate the implementation of 2030 Agenda through the GDI. It is kindly encouraged for the UNICEF Hong Kong to contribute in this regard by promoting related discussions and consultations. And finally, I wish this forum a great success. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you， 谢谢王主任，请留步，因为接下来呢，我们要进行节目仪式。May I now invite our honorable guests to please come on stage and officiate the opening ceremony. 现在有请主礼嘉宾上台。Once again, please welcome Ms. Judy Chan, Chairman, the Hong Kong Committee for UNICEF. 张志华先生，中央人民政府驻香港特别行政区联络办公室青年工作部部长，以及已经在台上的王琦先生，中华人民共和国外交部驻香港特别行政区特派员公署国际组织部主任 ，Mr. Edward Tu, Deputy Secretary for Education, the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, Mr. Ivan Chu, UNICEF Hong Kong Reimagine Education International Forum, Organizing Committee Co-Chair and Advocacy Chair Committee Chair, and also Mrs. Bonnie Lee, UNICEF Hong Kong Reimagine Education International Forum Organizing Committee Co-Chair and Fundraising Committee Chair. Thank you all our distinguished guests. And now I would like to invite our guests of honor to please place your hand on the LED wall. Yeah, you can see our mascot. 现在有请我们台上的主礼嘉宾可以轻放在我们这个 LED wall 上面。然后呢，这个动作不容易哦。然后你们还要转身看一下我们大会的摄影师。好，在刚才举手的站在中间的那一位。So please have a look at our photographer. So as you can see, UNI the backpack embodies the importance of quality education and the hope for the future that access to quality learning offers to child. 好了，可以。好，现在有请我们的主礼嘉宾先看一下我们后方的传媒朋友。Please have a look at the media at the back. 好，现在请我们的媒体朋友可以把这个重要的时刻记录下来。好，待会儿呢，我就会倒数3声，就可以让我们的主礼嘉宾再按一下我们 LED wall 上的这个吉祥物。好 ，on the count of 3, Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. Thank you. Together, let's rise above post-COVID education challenges. So may I now invite all our guests on stage to please have one more photo. 好了，在这个时候呢，也有请我们的主礼嘉宾可以移步向前一点点，然后让我們的大會攝影師呢再來多幾張的我們的合影，好嗎？好，而家有請我哋大會攝影師呢，為我哋再影多幾張嘅大合照嘅。在這個時候呢，我想表達一下剛才我聽到 Miss Judy Chan 所說的演講，我覺得是有很深的感受，因為今天其實我們每一個人來到現場，真的有我們的 mission， 我們真的可以透過今天這麼好的論壇，了解到我們如何可以幫助下一代。好，我們也來看一下我們後方的傳媒朋友。So let's have a look at the media zone. Thank you. Thank you very much. 好，我們在這個時候，我們再一次給我們台上的主禮嘉賓熱烈的掌聲，非常歡迎他們在百忙當中出席我們今天的論壇。Thank you, all our distinguished guests, and please remain. You can be seated. Thank you very much. Thank you. 在這個時候呢，有請我們的主禮嘉賓可以先就坐 and then enjoy the forum. So coming up, we will have a virtual keynote presentation by Mr. Andreas Lescher. Mr. Andreas Lescher is Director of Education and Skills at the OECD. He initiated and oversees the program for international student assessment and other international instruments, and have created a global platform for policymakers, researchers, and educators across nations and cultures to innovate and transform educational policies and practices. He has worked for over 20 years with ministers and education leaders to improve education. Also, he is the recipient of numerous honors and awards, including the Theodore Heuss Prize awarded in the name of the first president of the Federal Republic of Germany. And he also holds an honorary professorship at the University of Heidelberg. Mr. Lescher's keynote speech will point the way for us to rise above post-COVID education challenges and how we should educate learners for their future.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me. Your agenda on reimagining education is so important. After the pandemic, we don't just need to think how to build back better, but how to build forward very differently. And I commend UNICEF, and particularly yourself, Judy Chan, for taking a leadership role in this. The time that students lost because of school closures is tremendous. For those who were able to learn on their own, who had access to great technology, good support at home, of course, there were ways to get around closed school doors. But for students who used to be spoon-fed by their teachers, who did not have access to great technology nor support, those were very badly left behind. Fortunately, in most countries of the OECD, there's been a tremendous effort also to help students recover in the last school year. You can see here the effort put into psychological and mental health support, or, strengthened water, sanitation, hygiene, referral systems for students who need specialized services, early warning systems to identify students at risk of dropping out, or catch-up programs, accelerated programs. Many countries put measures in place, to help students make up. But we see in the last school year that that's already dropping, whereas the need for students to be supported will be actually much more extended. And at this moment, our eyes are still very much focused on the pandemic. But if we have learned one thing, it is that the future will always surprise us. Climate change is going to disrupt our lives a lot more than this pandemic, and artificial intelligence pushes us to think much harder of what makes us human. We know how to educate second-class robots, people who are good at repeating what we told them. But what's going to make us human in a world where the kind of things that are easy to teach and test have also become easy to digitize, to automate? And there's so many other forces to disrupt and shape our future. But if I look at the results from the last PISA assessment, you can see countries here lined up by their average performance. Often there's huge variability. Take a country like the Slovak Republic. The gap between the poorest and the wealthiest students is huge. The students from the 10% most disadvantaged families, score like students in the Philippines or the Dominican Republic, whereas the students from the wealthiest families are like the top performing education systems in the world. You look at this and you might think that poverty is destiny. Students from disadvantaged backgrounds just do not have those same chances. But then you look at Portugal, which has been able to lift the performance of its most disadvantaged students to come close to the average of performers in the Slovak Republic. And you can look at the 10% most disadvantaged 15-year-olds from the Chinese regions that took part in PISA. And they score almost as well as the wealthiest Slovak students. And that tells us that poverty need not be destiny if we get better at aligning resources with needs. If you come from a wealthy background, you're always going to find open doors in life. But if you come from a disadvantaged background, you typically have just one single chance in life, and that is, find a great teacher in a good school. If you miss that boat, you rarely get a second chance to catch up. And what our data show is that actually in most countries, the odds are stacked up against you. You can see in most countries, disadvantaged students get poorer educational resources and often also the less qualified teachers. Very few countries have been able to change the needle, to turn things around. We also see great variability in school performance. That's the dark blue segment on the bar here. If you are in Finland, there's almost no variability in school performance. The closest school is always the best school. It shows us if we connect our schools, if we have a great level of sensitivity to underperformance and intervene in ways in proportion to success, we can actually make that happen. At the other end of the spectrum, in Israel, we see huge variability in school performance. Where you end up in school makes a huge difference in how you end up in terms of academic performance. But let's have a look forward. As I mentioned at the beginning, the kind of things that are easy to teach have now also become easy to digitize, to automate. Throughout the world, and Hong Kong is just a great example, routine tasks are disappearing. If you have a job that you can explain to someone else in the form of a formula, tomorrow a robot, a computer is going to do that job better, quicker, faster. Technology-intensive tasks are on the rise, and when you put the two things together, you get a sense of the future of work. For those with the right mix of skills, this is liberating and exciting, but for those without those foundations, they face, poor job prospects and often poor life prospects. The digital world is becoming the real world. Look at the, number of hours that 15-year-olds spend in the digital world. 30, 40 hours. An enormous amount of time that is actually, engaged in the digital world. The digital world is the real world for young people. But we also see that, for students who use the internet a lot, often they have less positive feelings. They have a rise in negative feelings. We need to keep that in mind, that the digital world has, its assets, but also its shadows. We also ask ourselves, to what extent are young people really good navigators of the digital world? Can they, distinguish fact from opinion, manage complexity, integrate different data sources, navigate ambiguity? And you can see here on the left side in Singapore, Korea, parts of China, you can see actually there's a good share of young people who have those skills to navigate the digital world. But there's also a significant number of young people, and in many countries it's actually the majority, who are not yet for the digital world. Being born into the digital world doesn't mean you're a digital native. That's an important lesson from this data. No, you can say, well, humans were always better to invent new tools than to use them wisely. But in the times in which we live, that has a profound impact on your life chances, on your access to social resources, on your participation in society. And let me show you one thing more. In our most recent study, and unfortunately I don't have data for Hong Kong here, we looked at the reports from 10 and 15-year-olds on their creative skills. And in every city for which we had data, we saw that 15-year-olds reported lower levels of creativity than 10-year-olds. Now if I would tell you, well, 15-year-olds are doing worse in mathematics than 10-year-olds, you would immediately say, well, then something wrong in schooling. But we don't ask ourselves that question in creativity because we somehow consider this a kind of, extracurricular aspect of education. But it is the core of 21st century education. Now you can say, well, maybe 15-year-olds get more self-critical, self-conscious, and therefore, become less creative. But there's surely also something that our education systems contribute to this. We are all born with an abundance of creativity. If you have a 3-year-old son or daughter, they're going to question everything you tell them. They're going to experiment with anything you put in their way. They're always willing to learn and always willing to unlearn and relearn when their contexts change. But then, we put them into school, we make them compliant with our ways of thinking. We ask them to reproduce the wisdom of our times rather than to question it. And then, young people give up on some of their natural talents. In the 21st century, where, success is about imagination, your ability to connect the dots where the next innovation is going to come from, this is really serious. But I also want to look, beyond that, a question of mindset. Honestly, if you square the PISA results with money or with even the time spent learning, you don't find much of a correlation. Neither the money spent per student nor the time students spent learning is a great predictor for the learning outcomes on the PISA test. But here is a predictor that is truly powerful, and that is the growth mindset of students. You can see on the vertical axis the success of countries on the PISA test, and you can see Hong Kong is right up. On the horizontal axis, you see the growth mindset of students. On the right side, students, who believe the sky is the limit for their success. If I try hard, my teacher's going to help and I'm going to be really successful. They can overcome all difficulties. On the left side, you see students who think, well, it's all about the intelligence I was born with. And then, why should I study hard? No. And you can see in most countries, the two really line up. You can look at Estonia, the champion on growth mindset. Students also do well on the PISA test. In Indonesia, students struggle with math and science, and many believe that success is about the intelligence that they were born with. No. Hong Kong is an interesting exception on this pattern. Students do succeed academically, but many of them do not have enough of that growth mindset. You can say, well, does it really matter? In the end, they are successful academically. But when you look beyond, academic performance, you see students with a growth mindset were more motivated to master difficult tasks. They had a greater sense of self-efficacy, and they were less afraid of failure. Think about this. If you want your people to be imaginative, creative, you have to give them space to experiment. If they experiment, they take risks. If they take risks, they make mistakes. If our education systems do not help young people to learn from and with mistakes, maybe they will not be so creative. You could also see students with the growth mindset were more motivated to master difficult learning goals and saw greater value in schooling. What we also found interesting is that, growth mindset mattered more for girls, more for the disadvantaged, and more for students with an immigrant background. We can even go one step further and look at student well-being. Here you can see the students who reported a sense of belonging. School is a place where I make friends, where I, feel at home. And this is an area where actually Hong Kong performs very poorly. Many students, do succeed academically, but they feel a sense of isolation. We looked at student well-being at the age of 10. This is the average across the systems for which we have data, and you can see at 10 students are generally happy. My daily life is filled with things that interest me. I woke up fresh and rested, and so on. But when we look at the same outcomes at the age of 15, the bars get a lot shorter. So we ask ourselves, what drives that sense of psychological well-being? And in our data, the biggest predictors were, stress-resistant, optimism, and a sense of energy that students felt. And now you can ask yourself, so where does stress resistance, optimism, and energy come from? And the answer is actually simpler than what you think. It had a lot to do with the quality of student-teacher relationships, where students feel, my teacher knows who I am, my teacher knows who I want to become, and they help me on my journey. You can see that students feel a greater level of stress resistance, more optimism, more emotional control. And the same was true for many attributes that will be very important in the 21st century, like responsibility, persistence, empathy, trust, cooperation, tolerance, curiosity, creativity, sociability, self-efficacy, achievement motivation. All that shows us that education is not a transactional business. It's always a social, relational experience. Now you can say, well, what is the role of school versus families and friends? Of course, the latter matter as well. But, when we ask students about their satisfaction with life, actually a positive disciplinary climate related, positively to it. Bullying, obviously, was a negative predictor. But that index of belonging, where Hong Kong did not do so well, is one of our strongest predictors for student satisfaction with their lives. Their teachers' support, the feedback they received from their teachers, the level of cooperation with other students, and even competition at school are positively linked to students' life satisfaction. So being happy with their lives, school actually does play a very, very important role in this now. So once again, what does it mean to reimagine education? Well, in the past, success was about, teaching students something. Today, it's about enabling complex ways of thinking and working, building that agency where students, feel owners of what they learn and how they learn and when they learn and where they learn. In the past, we only needed, a few students to be successful because our economies only needed a few well-educated workers. Today, we do need everybody. And what you can see from our PISA comparisons that some education succeed to decouple, success from social background. It is a realistic goal to get every young person to do well in education. Of course, that requires a very different caliber of teachers. In the past, we told our teachers what to teach and how to teach. Today, we need professional knowledge workers, people who own their professional practice, who work with a high degree of professional autonomy and yet in a collaborative culture, who engage with communities, with parents, who make, school a whole of society experience, not just, an environment where people go. And of course, those people like to work not just in an industrial workplace, but in a place, where they, feel that they can actually, manage things in work environments that are flat, that are collegial, that are entrepreneurial. All of that, requires us to, manage tensions and dilemmas. How do we strike a balance between modernizing and disrupting education? The pandemic has created so much hardship, but it's also, accelerated unprecedented technological and social innovation. Where do we strike that balance? How do we reconcile new goals with our current structures? Our current schooling structures were born in the 19th century. Our teachers were educated in the 20th century, but we have the demands on young people placed on the 21st century now. How do we educate learners for their future rather than our past with our current structures now? How do we develop globally minded students and educators who remain rooted in their local traditions, their local cultures now? One thing is very clear: where students do not feel a strong floor under their feet, a strong floor of values, they are the ones who build walls around them, however self-defeating that may be. No? How do we leverage innovation in an environment like education that is very conservative in its nature? And we as parents are sometimes part of the problem, not part of the solution. We get very anxious when our children no longer learn what was important for us, or when they do learn things we no longer understand. Teachers are often more likely to teach how they were taught than how they were taught to teach. And as a policymaker, you can lose an election over education when something goes wrong, but you rarely win an election over education because it takes so much time to translate good ideas into better outcomes. That's why the road of educational reform is littered with many ideas, good ideas, that were just poorly implemented. How do we leverage potential with our current reality? Well, everybody would like, to bring them a spaceship with new teachers. But that's never going to arrive. We need to invest in the capacity of the people currently working in our schools and our universities. Those people need to transform their practices, learn from each other, build that collaborative culture. And in Hong Kong, that's not so easy. Schools are quite isolated. They're all independent, all very successful. But the future means the network society, where there's much more sharing of good practices and development and joint ownership of professional practice. How do we reconcile the virtual world with the face-to-face reality? Of course, technology has created incredible opportunities. When you study mathematics on a computer, the computer can figure out how you study and make your learning so much more adaptive, so much more granular, so much more interactive. Why would you listen to a teacher explaining to you the result of an experiment when you can do that experiment in a virtual laboratory? Teachers can use technology to see how different students learn differently and then, embrace that differences with, much more differentiated pedagogical strategies. But remember, during the pandemic, we've also learned how important the social contact is between learners and educators. Technology can amplify great teaching, but it will never replace that social, relational heart of education. And last but not least, how do we find that right balance between learning and education? Shifting, from broadcasting something, from, providing content to students, to build that learner ownership, that curiosity, that hunger for learn that will make young people lifelong learners who learn to love and love to learn. All tough questions, but I know you're going to find good answers at your conference on Reimagining Education. Thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you, Mr. Slashers, for his informative and insightful sharing. 刚才听到他的分享，我不知道大家有几句话会不会也是触动到你们的思想，就是他讲了一句话 ：“Who am I？ 我是谁？”其实我们如何可以协助我们下一代找回他们，而且 learn to love, love to learn， 这个也是非常的重要。就是我们如何可以进步，就是因为我们要充满好奇心，而且如何协助我们下一代可以成立他们自己的品牌形象，成为领袖。就好像接下来我们要看的 video 一样 ，UNICEF Hong Kong promotes children's rights through an array of education and youth programs. For example, the Young Envoys program has nurtured more than 1,400 young leaders since it was launched in 1994. This year's Young Envoys have promoted children's rights and the vision of Reimagine education to general public through various means such as short films, writings, drawings, and community services. Let's listen to our Young Envoys' point of views towards the learning experiences under the COVID-19 pandemic and what's their expectation of future education.
The pandemic has switched education from physical mode to online mode, and sometimes the quality of online education will be decreased because of the poor network or some other challenges.
It's more difficult for students to receive knowledge under the pandemic as they can't have face-to-face lesson. The quality of online lesson will be distracted by anything at home.
Yeah, I think self-discipline is very important, and I always fall behind schedules when online lessons as there's no supervision from teachers or other students at school.
I think that students have to face to the computer to have online lessons for a long time. They will have social isolation.
The pandemic has led to social isolation, and students are forced to separate with each other, and they could only stay in their homes. Their normal social life is disrupted, and the lack of interaction may easily make them feel lonely.
Over 300 million of young people in developing and underdeveloped countries, they do not have chance to learn under the pandemic because they do not have internet and device. It implies the government of the awareness to do more and more people can have the chance to learn. For people and the government providing more internet or digital device can achieve this wish as well.
During the Young Envoys training, we have a virtual visit to Syria. We know more about daily life in Syria and how UNICEF works in Syria.
I remember seeing an early childhood development center being set up at Syria by UNICEF, and I remember seeing a girl playing football in the center too, which simply impresses me.
Yeah, although we are facing many challenges now, but we are glad to have everyone to support us.
I would like to hold an event related to children's development through a quiz competition. Students might be divided into groups for competition, and they can improve their communication skills while communicating with others. Furthermore, students can learn more about children's education and rights by doing research.
I would like to expand the way students learn. For example, providing more field trips. During the field trip, they can customize the itinerary for their own goals while communicating with their groupmates. This can help them to improve their communication skills and leadership skills.
Everyone got their own desks, learning environments, and their own way of studying that they feel comfortable with. The future education will be a more personalized, self-directed learning mode. Students would be given the resources to study, and they have to grasp their own way of learning. This way, education can be tailor-made down to each individual. I will ask children from different parts of the world what their dream education is like. Sometimes I feel that some education policies in school may not be the best in students' point of view, such as imposing more tests would disrupt their original learning schedules. Therefore, knowing our expectations, decision makers could design better policies. Knowing children's expectations, we can definitely help in improving the current education system.
I'm Sophie Chen.
I'm Marcus Chow.
I'm Ellie Joy and
I'm UNICEF
UNICEF
Young
Young
Envoys.
Envoys.
The pandemic has led to social isolation, loneliness, and anxiety. Experiencing pandemic itself will induce chronic stress for children, caregivers, and family. The disruption of children's routine living and friction within family has brought stressors for children's mental well-being. Clinical evidence indicated that persistent fear and anxiety can affect young children's learning and development. With this in mind, how could academia and educators work together to turn this challenge to opportunities? Coming next, we are ready to begin the first panel of our forum, Mental Resilience Development. Without further ado, let's welcome the host for this session, Ms. Jessica Ng, Executive Vice Chairman of South China Financial Holdings Limited and South China Media Group. Ms. Ng launched her namesake magazine Jessica in 2000, which soon became the highest circulation women's magazine in Hong Kong. And later, she established Just Network with the mission of connecting, inspiring, and empowering young women. Her panel of two distinguished speakers are Professor Cecilia Lai Wan Chan and Mrs. Jennifer Yu Chan. Professor Cecilia Chan is a professor emeritus at the University of Hong Kong, and she is a pioneer in the promotion of community health and mental health in Hong Kong for disadvantaged populations, and she has contributed to the establishment of services in support of women, children, persons with chronic illness, and bereaved persons. For Mrs. Jennifer Yu Chan is Group President and Deputy Vice Chairwoman of CTF Education Group. She holds senior positions at educational institutions around the world, including Dean's Advisory Group at Harvard Graduate School of Education, the Council of Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and also the course of University of Hong Kong. So ladies and gentlemen, let's hand over to Ms. Ng. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first panel of today's UNICEF Reimagine Education International Forum on the subject of mental resilience. We start our first panel with a video from youths across the world sharing their perspectives on mental health.
School offered such a safe space for our young people, for them to be able to have their friends to talk to escape the realities of their homes. And then we were locked away for what was 2 years.
Some of my peers also, they reported a rise in cases of child abuse.
COVID-19 has made this situation very much more worse. Mental health has to be incorporated in the school curriculum so that the children have an open environment to learn and
support or promote youth-led organizations,
so that they have the agency to act as change makers for themselves and their communities.
Teachers' workloads as well is an issue. If they are stressed out and we are stressed out, then how is the school going to function?
World leaders need to invest across institutions in the mental health of children.
Invest or to promote the trainings of young people in mental health trainings.
we need enough resources and attention for the mental health services at national and subnational level, and also at the community level where it matters the most.
The village has to be present to manage the stress levels in schools. We really don't know who to go to. We don't know who to turn to. When will we be prioritizing our mental health?
Thank you. In the face of COVID, mental resilience is a subject close to all of our hearts. The COVID-19 epidemic has been a source of unexpected, prolonged stress and adversity for many children, caregivers, and families. Lockdowns have disrupted the lives of children. They've lost regular activities. They were unable to attend in-person schooling. There was much more increased time at home and limited physical social interaction with friends, which is a very core part of growing up for young children. This has been a particularly difficult time for children because COVID has affected much larger portion of their lives as compared to adults. So we'll turn to Professor Chan. Could you share with us the global trends of children's mental well-being? Are there any examples of community projects in mitigating children's mental resilience?
Certainly. Can we have the slides, please? I'm going to briefly talk about the development of mental health situations globally, locally, and what are some of the events happening in the local situation. A lot have been done, although not enough. More people need to pay attention to the situation. Well, in terms of world trend, there are studies that have followed post-COVID. The situation is getting worse. More and more people are, especially children and young people, especially girls, and in disadvantaged areas, children in poverty, their mental health deteriorated. The incidences of domestic violence increases. More children go into child labor and poverty, hunger. This is internationally very sad. And the situation in Hong Kong, I think the keynote address just now is so exemplary. It provides a very comprehensive international statistics and data. The situation in Hong Kong is very similar, but if you look at the hospital authority figures, you can see that psychiatric patients aged below 18 has increased quite dramatically in a period of 5 years, from about 30,000 to above 40,000, which is quite alarming. And 51.5% of the secondary school children has shown symptoms of depression, 1/4 of them anxiety, and so on and so forth. So these are almost common knowledge that we all become nervous. This is before the pandemic. And after the pandemic is even worse. Most recent waiting time in some of the areas for psychiatry is 48 weeks, almost 1 year. And in some of the areas, median is 48 weeks. In some of the areas, worst case is 94 weeks, which is 1.5 years. So if you need to see a psychiatrist, the services are very bad in some of the areas. Different areas differ. But the incidences of suicidal thoughts, self-destruction thoughts, drugs, all of these incidences increase post-COVID. In a conference on suicide, it is found that 6 children under age of 15 took their lives in 2019, and average of 4 youth died by suicide every month, which is quite alarming. And for us, any child taking their life is too many. And you can see that the Hong Kong suicide among young children have increased from 0.9 in 2019 to 1.7 per 100,000 in 2021. So it is an increasing trend after COVID. multiple reasons. Obviously, from Society for Community Organization, from this photo album, you can see ethnic minorities. You see the Chinese homework. The mom who doesn't know Chinese was totally puzzled. So children living in very, very congested areas, all lumped into the same space, no activity, parents are stressed out, and all of these issues were quite alarming. And just last Saturday, an organization called Dreams Possible conducted a survey of more than 2,000 secondary schools, primary and secondary school students, and found that 1/5 of the primary and secondary school students have no one to talk to about their worries and stress. 1 in 5, which is also quite worrying. And 50% of the parents felt that the children do not listen to them, find them to grumble and mumble too much. It's a search for autonomy. So this organization produced cards for 3A training, self-coach, to empower the parents, the teachers. You can see the family with Michelle and her 2 daughters and her husband. Michelle is herself a teacher, and every day she goes home, the first thing that she would ask her daughters are, have you finished your homework? And every time when she goes home, her 2 girls hide into their rooms. And after she learned this re-education of communicating with her children, listen to them more, and the 2 girls told them, actually they shared in the press conference, that the mom changed because the mom do not focus on their schoolwork alone. The mom focused on them as a person, as a child. So that's actually very, very important. So I'm going to introduce a resilience framework. The resilience framework that we have to promote cultural relevant concepts of resilience, multiple intelligence, the power of physical activities, and the innate mindset. In the keynote speech, there's a lot of mention about mindset. I'll be talking a little bit about that. Cultivation of values. On the right-hand top corner is children in China. They were exchanging goods for recycling and things like this, integrated into all schools. On the left photo is about a local small social enterprise that promotes use of bamboo into arts and crafts, intergenerational construction of bamboos as camps, bamboos as lights, and so on. And bamboo itself is a very resilient plant. It is flexible. It can be used for construction. It stands resistance. It can bend in the wind. So very, very important for us to cultivating things which are interesting, but in a fun way where children can enjoy. The most difficult problem, as indicated in the keynote, was that Hong Kong students perform well academically, but none the rest. Then the rest of self-esteem, teamwork, and everything else were horrible. And school bullying was very, very severe. And I would like to introduce Gardner's multiple intelligence. He introduced 9 areas of multiple intelligence of every individual, especially children, that we have to develop. And the only thing that Hong Kong treasure is verbal and language, where you write and take exams by writing. We also pay a little attention to mathematics, now computer and things like this, STEM, right? And then all of the rest were neglected. And they are body, kinesthetic. I will be talking more about that. Nature, we become connected with nature and appreciate the environment. Interpersonal. EQ is more effective than IQ, we all know. And in interpersonal relationships, appreciation of life and appreciation of other people, acceptance of self, all of these things are very important. Visual, spatial skills, existential skills, musical skills, intrapersonal skills, all of these are actually very, very important. And we have not, if we do not invest into the multiple intelligence of children, their overall health and mental health would be a disaster. So, for example, let me give you an example of, I'm introducing a few very small organizations, like Kids on the Block, which is a collaboration of the Society for the Rehabilitation as well as the Society for Protection of Disabled Children. And it was founded by Dr. Marian Fang 25 years ago, adopted from a US Kids on the Block. So they promote, they go to use puppets to go to schools to teach children about disabled children, dyslexic children, children with illness, people who have blindness or deafness, people who are as children who are disabled or special learning needs. So they are promoting inclusion, diversity, which is very rare, and the children just loved it. For example, we have body and kinesthetic movements. This movie actually was a movie that the parents and the children were all together doing some really simple indoor sports by social service organizations. But they have been sitting and confined to a very tiny cubicle living space, and where they cannot move at all. And so music, and because physical exercise actually promote a lot of stuff, lots of things like teamwork, a lot of issues like learning to fail, not only to succeed, because we all have to compete with ourselves and never mind about results. We have to venture into new things. If you learn to cycle, you fail and you get yourself injured, and it is okay. If we do outdoor sports, we sweat and we get muscle ache and all that. And this is part of growth, and this is where resilience developed. Yeah. So these are some of the videos. So arts, dance, music, and movements are so neglected in schools now. We really, really need all of these. For example, Zhou Daifeng Foundation funded this program of the Federation of Women's Centers. During COVID, they set up community childcare space and train community minders to help take care of the children while some of the mothers have to go to work. And these are the space where they know nearby schools. You remember the best school is the nearest school, nearest space where in the community where they can get together. My colleague, Professor Rainbow Ho, is also promoting a lot of expressive arts for children and for young people. For example, in the project that she works with children with special learning needs, she went to 40 schools and NGOs and trained almost 18,000 beneficiaries throughout the process. And it is through this because children and youth find it hard or could not articulate themselves or emotions through words or expression, but they can through other means. Young people, for example, expressive artworks. These are actually very, very important. Oops. And you can see this child. By simple exercises like this, these children learns resilience, learns failure is okay. If they fail, they drop, they come up again and play again. And they learn that they can lose. This morning, colleagues called me to say, the self-fulfillment, do you mean 唔认输,不认输,还是认输? And I said, 认输, because we have to learn to fail, and failure is okay because failure is the mother of success. Failure is not failure, it is feedback. Gives us another chance to do it again and again and again and again. That's resilience. So what WHO promotes, children aged between 5 to 17, they need 60 minutes of high-level, vigorous physical activity every day to ensure their brain, their psychomotor, and their intellectual development improve. There are huge studies internationally that have proven for schools that forces, sort of, students to do physical exercises an hour a day, their public exam outcomes were significantly better than those schools who don't. So from now on, if you have children, go home, not only ask your children, have you finished your schoolwork? Ask them, have you finished your day's vigorous physical activity? You know, take a child to running and jogging and football, whatever that is, for 60 minutes every day. And that is very, very important. In Hong Kong, we also have this. Lazy lion. Should not be lazy. Parents, wake up, you know, teachers, wake up. And we all have to develop this resilient mindset, which is absolutely important. And this mindset is that we can change. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Chan, for your candid sharing. And I think we've all learned that when we get home, the first thing you ask your children is, have you done your exercise for the day? To our next speaker, Jennifer. Could you share with us the challenges faced by young children in the school setting during the pandemic, and what measures have been taken by your education group? Thank you.
Great, thank you. So my work has been predominantly in the K-12 sector, so from early childhood through secondary school. And I hope my sharing today is about some of the work that we've been doing in the community. And a lot of it actually resonates some of the research work that Professor Chan has shared with us. Can I have the slides, please? Thank you. So maybe just to kick off, mental health struggles, challenges, issues, illnesses has already been on the rise before the pandemic, and we see this firsthand in the schools that we operate and also with the charity work that we do in the community. However, as mentioned by many of the speakers, this has been exacerbated in Hong Kong because of the pandemic, social distancing, because of school closures. And so in 2021, when we saw the significance in mental health issues in the community, under the leadership of Adrian Chang, we started the WEMP Foundation, which stands for Wellbeing, EQ, Mental Health, and Parenting, to provide support for schools and the community. So today, I just want to take the opportunity to do a case sharing of the work that we have done, and I do see many of the supporters of WEMP here also today. So, at WEMP, our mission is to really provide lifelong mental health support system, and it really focuses on intervening at the vulnerable period of childhood. Some of these stats have also been shared by Professor Chan. So 39% of primary and secondary school students were showing symptoms of mental health disorders, and this is in Hong Kong by Save the Children. Professor Chan also shared, an increase of 40% of children seeking professional support for mental health and illnesses as reported by Hospital Authority in the past 5 years. These are incredibly alarming figures. So why start from childhood? So we're really talking about the age of kindergarten, 3 years old to 12 years old, which is the main age group that WELM supports, is because research also shows that better health in children in childhood actually leads to 50% less mental illnesses. And we know that having that as the foundations going into preteens, into adolescence life, when in high school the pressures of academics also rise, that foundation early age is incredibly important. So at WEMP, we really focus on children first, parent first. But home is really an extension, school is really the extension of the home environment. So we were talking about this pyramid whereby we're supporting parents, schools, and children in developing positive parenting education and also learning on how to communicate more on students' emotions and mental well-being. We really believe in collective impact and efforts and bringing in the NGO partners and also industry experts and professionals in designing our programs and also rolling out into various schools. So here are just some of the names of the partners we've been working with since 2021 on our first year of pilot. So how we have structured our programs, I think this echoes a lot of the work that Professor Chan has also shared, right? Is really at 3 levels. Level 1, at the bottom of the pyramid, is what we call universal support, where we're hoping to reach all students in the schools that we partner with through various programs, including parenting seminars and also compassion programs, working with students in educating them on the communication of their feelings and also destigmatizing what mental health means from a very early age. The next level up is really what we call the level 2 intermediate support. We're doing more smaller group parenting focus groups and parenting support groups whereby parents are able to participate in our programs on going deeper on positive education and also on parenting support groups. Much of the work that we do are in local schools in Hong Kong and particularly in low-income families. So over the last year, some of the focus regions that we've been working with include Sham Shui Po, Tin Shui Wei, Kwun Tong, and etc. And we've reached out to 20 schools over the last year and pending 50 more schools in the coming year. Level 3 are really like the more complex cases. Dr. Chan also had shared it takes over a year for children to be able to get professional support. And this is incredibly difficult for children from low-income backgrounds. And many of these at-risk cases need emergency funding to get the support that they need. So level 3 also includes support for children that are referred by our NGO partners. So just to share with you a few specific examples of the work at that level 1 universal support for children. So we've worked with primary school, partnering up with Just Feel. And Professor Chan also mentioned that actually students, many times young children just don't have the language or they don't know how to express their feelings. And so through these workshops, children are able to understand more how to communicate. And so this is what's done in the first version 1.0. What I want to share more with you is actually 2.0, which has been developed by the foundation, which are simple tools that we can facilitate families and children to communicate their emotions by having these emotion cards, right? And we found this as being very effective tools to help children and their parents and the schools to work with them on making it more accessible and easy for children to communicate their emotion and make it a habit for communication. This is another initiative that we have under WEMP, which is the 18 District Positive Parenting School Tour. We had actually produced and created this short movie as part of the program in our parenting seminar. We know how incredibly difficult it is for parents, particularly from our communities. Chinese parents don't normally talk about their emotions. Culturally, it's something that is just not very customary. And so we felt that through a film that talks about the life of an ordinary family. It's an intergeneration film, but talks about the struggles when the grandparent had passed away and also the family struggles during this time, and how actually the young child is impacted by the parental stresses, by the environment, not being able to communicate their emotions. And we wanted this film, as it was screened in schools, to be a starting point to have the parents know that many of these struggles that they go through, they are not alone. And we were incredibly encouraged when we did this screening during the pandemic time at schools that parents were very moved and they actually shared in the workshops and after the film how they related to this film. And actually they felt that they can make that first step to communicate some of the stresses that they have at home, and they had never even realized that some of the things that they were doing at home were actually impacting their children's emotion. Parents even shared that maybe by seeing the film they realized that there were things that they had done wrong at home, and maybe it's time for them to also apologize to their child. And this is something that's very new to them. So a lot of this echoes what Professor Chan had talked about, that parents are actually the key in helping children build a strong emotional foundation from childhood. So mentioned earlier a little bit about the second level of support. So after some of these parenting workshops and seminars, we then go into schools to deepen the work on positive education and parenting education on mental health, how to manage their own mental health, but also how to help their children, and how to also notice signs of early emotional stresses in their children. So we're very lucky to also partner with Dr. Phyllis Chan from Queen Mary Hospital in designing our programs, and that has been instrumental to the work that we do. Next is the kindergarten mental health workshop. So this is a 3-year plan, and we're very happy to be supported by a foundation in supporting this work in reaching 5,000 kindergarten children in schools in Hong Kong, to provide them with also the awareness, the language, and also the education on what well-being and mental health means. Finally, as mentioned earlier, this is where intervention for emergency at-risk cases. So since 2021, we have also supported 60 children who were referred by NGO partners that needed emergency funding to be supported during this time. Personally, through my work in education, I've continued to mentor students, and I was also surprised that many of the students during this pandemic time found it very difficult to communicate with their parents, and this is across the board, from children from low-income families and also children who are studying in private schools. And oftentimes, actually, that first line of defense was gone, because in schools, when schools were in operation, teachers can witness the shift in behavior in children. But when children were not in school and they were on Zoom, and oftentimes classes in Zoom, there's like 2 pages of Zoom, you're not even seeing every single children on the screen, students didn't have an avenue to communicate. And so there was a student that I had worked with that actually had some shift in behaviors, but parent didn't even notice that, and it was actually disruption to sleep. And it's very easy for parents to brush off, oh, well, you're having lack of sleep, you're not managing your time well, and these are children who are in their teenage age handling examinations as well, right? So it's really important for us to have these resources, have that first line of defense at school to be supporting families. So with the student that I worked with, I had flagged to the parents that, I've worked with your child for 4 years. Sleep has never really been that big of a factor. I think this is an early sign of distress, anxiety. It's important to seek help. And because of early intervention, the student actually got help immediately. And within 4 weeks, they learned how to cope with the stresses of the pandemic, cope with the stresses of studying online, and finished off the school year and graduated very successfully and off to college, right? So firsthand, and also with the community work we do, we know how that intervention and immediate intervention is really, really important. So just a little bit about the impact that we've had to date. So we've reached 14,000 parents over the last year plus and 7,000 students. And as mentioned, we're looking to do more work this year with the support of the community leaders that we've gotten involved with WEMP. And it is our goal to reach 50 more schools this year, now that schools are operating this year, and it's easier for us to go into schools to do the work. Finally, we truly believe that children today are tomorrow's leader and contributors to society. And like UNICEF, we believe in educating all children. We believe that well-being is important to a child's education, and we believe in educating and nurturing children so that they can have a positive impact to the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. On this point, I would like to bring out a message from a 2021 UNICEF research report. Not all was bad during COVID. Some positive points to take away is that engaging in recreational activities like Zooming with your family, connecting with family, having more time to yourself and your family, these were all positive contributors to well-being. So not all was bad. And just a final question to both our panelists. How can we facilitate equitable access to mental resilience development support? So perhaps Professor Chan first.
As I mentioned just now, that disadvantaged young children from disadvantaged populations like children with illness and ethnic minority and things like that, they suffer a lot of bullying in school. So the promotion of resilience and inclusion and anti-bullying education. I see the CEO of Equal Opportunity Commission also here. So the general awareness of cultivating inclusion and diversity, acceptance is actually very important.
Thank you. And Jennifer?
Two things. I think it is about destigmatizing mental health, and that starts from a young age. And second to that is really access to professional counselors in school. As I mentioned earlier, school is the first line of defense. If we can have equitable access, I believe that if all schools can have access to professional counselors, we're able to continually support students, we're able to intervene before any case becomes clinically, mental health illness, and we're also able to support teachers ongoing. With the pace of change, I believe the triggers that create, mental wellness should be something that is ongoing, developed in schools. So those would be the two areas for equitable access.
Thank you. So I think in summary, what we can bring away from today's panel is that supporting children and adolescents to build mental resilience, it's the joint responsibility of parents, teachers, schools, healthcare and social care professionals, as well as other care players in the community. With multi-sectorial efforts, together we can empower different layers and aspects of children's mental health support, from universal preventative interventions and social considerations to specialized services. So thank you very much to both our speakers on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica, Jennifer, and also Professor Chan. And could you please remain on stage to receive a certificate? May we now invite Chairman of the Hong Kong Committee of UNICEF, Ms. Judy Chan. And also UNICEF Hong Kong Reimagine Education International Forum Organizing Committee co-chairs, Mr. Ivan Chu and Mrs. Bonnie Lee. So please come on stage and have a group photo. So once again, thank you, Ms. Jessica Ng, Professor Cecilia Chan, and also Mrs. Jennifer Yu Chan for such a wonderful insights sharing. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, our panelists, and also thank you, Ms. Chan, Mr. Chu, and Mrs. Lee. Thank you very much, and please be seated. Thank you. So do you know the thinking and inspirations of our children? Up next is a video about junior hosts of the For Every Child We Listen children's radio and TV program, co-produced by UNICEF Hong Kong and Radio Television Hong Kong. The program showcased 22 novice junior DJs aged between 8 and 17. Some of them also took a leap up to another level by becoming junior hosts of TV program, sharing views on children's rights and topics relating to United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in front of camera. Let's hear from 4 of our junior DJs about what they have experienced and learned from this program.
婉晴啊，你參加咗啲咩活動啊？
我以前參加電台節目，我記得我有一個節目係錄 反轉校園，咁係講一個可以帶寵物啊嘅校園啦。我喺我哋想嘅一個地方入邊學習係一件不可思議嘅事情。
如果可以俾我去改建我個課室咧，我會希望我哋課室可以增添一部跑步機咯，因為我覺得香港學生咧嘅生活其實真係非常之繁忙啦。如果可以增添一部跑步機，咁都可以推動到啲同學做下運動咁咯。
如果喺課室入邊可以食嘢嘅話就好啦。
咁我記得就係有一集啊，就係即係未來嘅社會發展係點樣啦。我隨時咧撳一粒掣，就可以飛到去我想去嘅地方，喺瞬間。將來我做科學家係咪？
無限創新，我哋要。
本身拍嗰集係打風啦，之後就要喺 Zoom 度進行嘅。我未準備過啦，都可以訓練到我嘅應變能力。
可能你勁過我啊，真係可以呢個反應力可以。
令我最深刻嘅係集數以外嘅嘢咯，體驗到原來一個電視節目背後要有咁多人力物力嘅喎，咁樣樣。
呢個計劃開始之後咧，我就唔知點解，即係一個無形嘅感覺喺我心入邊咧，我就會好突然，即係會同人主動傾偈，同埋或者同啲叻 teacher，即係啲外籍嘅老師咧，都會同佢溝通下，講下英文，跟住我都可以學到英文。咁其實語言溝通我都可以有自信心㗎，已經。
即係做好多嘢都唔會輕易放棄咯。仲有溝通能力，即係嗰啲例如同你依家同你講嘢。係
咯，我同你都有感受嘅溝通能力啦，我哋。
我學識咗咧，要喺乜嘢嘅場合用乜嘢嘅語調去講嘢啦。
同埋我覺得我係同咗我家人冇咁容易鬧交啊，更加關係變得更加融合咯。
我比較以前，我已經可以積極樂觀咁去面對我嘅生活。我希望可以繼續維持落去咁樣。
同埋我係覺得我自己係有好多自信心同埋溝通能力，我希望我永遠都可以 keep 住落去啦。
同以前比較，我覺得自己更懂得點樣去待人接物。
之前我都係好幼稚嘅，咁依家就深思熟慮。
我嘅夢想係做甜品師傅同埋配音員。
我嘅夢想係從事音樂方面嘅工作。
我想成為一個電台 DJ。
我嘅夢想咧就係想環遊世界，見識下各地嘅文化。
多謝大家支持我哋追尋夢想耶！
In addition to foundation skills such as literacy and numeracy, our children need transferable skills to chase their dreams. By creating multiple pathways to expand skill sets like social engagement and girl empowerment, it would promote equity and inclusiveness. While over 2/3 of surveyed countries included transferable skills within their national policy documents, only 1/10 of them have defined the learning standard and progressions. In such, let's start today's second panel, Beyond Formal Education, and hear from our experts on how transferable skills can be promoted in Hong Kong. Let's all join together and welcome this topic's host, Professor Kai-Ming Chan, Professor Emeritus of the University of Hong Kong. He's currently member of global advisory committees for several international organizations, and locally he was member of the Education Commission and also was instrumental in the overhauling education reform at the turn of the century, and his two distinguished fellow panelists, Professor Namila Rao and also Ms. Anna Hu. Professor Rao is a professor in early childhood development and education at the University of Hong Kong, and she has received awards for both research and teaching, and she has had significant administrative leadership roles at Hong Kong U. Professor Rao regularly provides expertise and consultancy for the UN and its associated agencies. And also, please welcome Ms. Anna Hu. She is an internationally renowned jewelry designer born in Taiwan and also educated in the US. She founded her own brand at the age of 30 and opened her first boutique 1 year later in New York's famed Plaza Hotel. Celebrities such as Madonna, Emily Blunt, Natalie Portman, and also Scarlett Johansson has worn her exquisite jewelry. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists, and also let's hand over to Professor Chan.
Thank you very much for this occasion. It's a learning experience for me. But I don't speak without a PowerPoint, so I have a PowerPoint. Very short one. We that kind of consciousness. So this is a new normal. And so Helen's co-worker, Sarah Ellis, said this is a squiggle. The career paths are no longer a ladder. It's like rock climbing. Each step you have to find the next step, and you know where the next step is. Nonetheless, you go on. So Sarah says that now I have new possibilities every day. I have new choices, new interests, new directions, new hopes, opportunities everywhere, every day. So this is my prelude for this session. Okay? So, Numera, up to you.
Professor Cheng has put me on the spot. Thank you. May I have the... Thank you. I would like to...
Oh, yes. Never, you never know what's the next step.
we're also used to having our clickers with us. If I may have my PowerPoint, please. It's just such an honor to be here and to be on the stage with such an august panel. I'm going to talk about the importance of transferable skills. And just quickly, I'm going to talk about some of the skills that I think we need to succeed at work, at school, and in life. And I really do want to talk a little bit about UNICEF's view and its recommendations on promoting transferable skills. I've had the privilege to serve on Hong Kong Committee of UNICEF and plus worked with UNICEF field offices in dozens of countries. And I just want to talk about some of the noteworthy approaches to promoting transferable skills. So what are transferable skills and why are they important? We've heard this about this very eloquently from Andreas Schleicher, from Professor Cheng, from Ms. Cheng. Basically, we talk about certain skills being important. And I don't want to say that the skills we learn at school are not important. They're very important. They're the foundational skills, the literacy and numeracy that we really need to succeed. We know that people today, they may not have enough food in low and middle income countries, but they'll have a smartphone. And they need to have literacy skills and numeracy skills to operate those smartphones. So we also need digital skills. I think they're very important today, and we need job-specific skills. So right in the middle, we talk about transferable skills. And there are many different definitions of these transferable skills. We talk about soft skills, EQ skills, 21st century skills, but put simply, they're the cognitive skills, such as problem solving, the social skills as the ability to get along with others, and the emotional skills, the ability to regulate our emotions and to build that mental resilience that we just heard about in the last panel. Some of you in the audience may actually be familiar with some of these icons, right? Many of my students have never seen a typewriter, right? I told them that I got my job offer from Hong Kong U by telex. They don't know what a telex is. But because of the speed of technology change, we've gone from this to this. So we have to learn, as they say. We need to navigate in this fast-changing environment. So we need these transferable skills to allow us to function in this fast-changing environment for lifelong learning because of changing workplace demands, because we need to empower and engage our children and youth, and of course the development of resilience, which was so nicely spoken about. So we can gain these transferable skills in school, during non-formal training, and during in-service training and jobs. So UNICEF has a very nice model. They talk about getting these skills through teaching and learning. That's through formal education. I'm going to give examples of these. They talk about the enabling environments and systems strengthening. Because I don't have very much time, I'm just going to give one example from work about each of these. So in Hong Kong, in our school curriculum, we endeavor to promote transferable skills. You can't teach transferable skills in isolation. They have to be part of a subject. So I have two examples. One is from Serbia, where they have a preschool curriculum that actually explicitly focuses on promoting these socio-emotional skills. And in fact, I do want to put a plug for UNICEF's excellent package on socio-emotional skills. And on the right is something that was developed in 2000 in Anji County in Zhejiang province, which is a rural county. There's Madam Cheng. She developed this Anji Play curriculum, and it's a whole early childhood curriculum that has gone across the world. But I do want to say just one thing about this curriculum. it wasn't designed to promote transferable skills, but Madam Cheng, 22 years ago, she felt that children are being protected too much. They need to take risks in play. You know, we cotton wool our children, right? And what actually in this kind of outdoor play that Madam Cheng promoted, children are taking risks, they're learning teamwork, they're learning to manage their emotion, they're building resilience. So this was through the curriculum in a program. We also, we're very concerned, we've heard other speakers talk about gender transformative education. Every speaker has talked about girls. It's not only about girls, it's about boys. In many countries in Latin America, boys are falling behind. There are more boys, males in university in many disciplines than girls. So gender transformative education moves beyond access to empowerment of both women and men. I love this. This is something taken during the COVID pandemic. We've heard from our speakers that schools are central to family and child well-being. We know what happened, I don't need to repeat, when schools were closed. Schools were a source of transferable skills. Schools were also a source of mental resilience. Teachers were absolutely outstanding during the pandemic. And they actually, you know, in many countries, schools were where children got their only nutritious meals. And teachers used to take meals to students from poor families. Because of time, I just quickly mentioned 2 or 3 programs that focus on enabling environments. The country of Jordan is focusing on SDG 4, which is enabling equitable, universal access, quality education to all. And basically, Jordan has lots and lots of refugees, particularly from Syria. And what they found is schools were not a safe place for these children because about 70% of Syrian refugees reported getting bullied and didn't want to go to school. So they had an after-school program, and they build sports, so children work together, and it's been evaluated. So actually, we want children to have a safe school, what UNICEF calls child-friendly schools, right? So that is how we change the environment. At the other level of system strengthening, UNICEF's Upshift program is an excellent example of how to build transferable skills and create opportunities for socially disadvantaged youth in low and middle income countries. It has several phases: skill building, civic education, empowerment, and entrepreneurship. It started in Kosovo, and it's now in 32 countries. Basically, it's for youth from socially disadvantaged communities. Let me just give you a quick example. Say in a community, there's no preschool, and they're unemployed youth. They encourage the youth to get what we call TIVET. They train the teachers, and they provide safe spaces for early education. That way you're meeting a community demand for early education, you're giving youth skills, and you're providing a way of community engagement. So this is a very popular approach. And as I said, it's now in 34 countries around the world. So this is working at the system level. The Upshift program looks different in different countries. I'd like to end by reminding us of the Sustainable Development Goals that we have committed to and to protect our planet and end poverty and combat climate change. Transferable skills deal with at least 5 Sustainable Development Goals, such as quality education, good health, gender equality, no poverty, and zero hunger. So I think that transferable skills are really very important, and we need to think beyond formal education. Thank you.
Thank you, Namra. Namra has been working in quite a large number of international projects. Anna?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you for Judy's lovely invitation. I flew especially from Monaco to Hong Kong to join this very sympathetic conference. And also, in the next few minutes, I will share my personal experience as a mother of 3, how I survived the pandemic time with 2 teenagers, 18, 15, and a young baby girl, 4 years old, with different method of education. Thank you. May we please start with the slide? Thank you.
Already there.
So start a little bit introduction about myself. I'm a typical Chinese kid. Thanks to Professor Chen's focus on how a Chinese student should be. I was trained as a classical musician, cellist, and yes, my parents never actually they take on my sports class, so I can focus on academic. And it's all about competition, competition, competition. So it doesn't matter if it's in Hong Kong or in Taiwan, it's all the same. So luckily, I was able to compete as the national champion to study abroad in Boston. And I had this opportunity, because of time, I will make a super express, to learn from Yo-Yo Ma and to play with him in the private art school near Boston at age of 15. And after that, I have always thought I would be a music teacher. And life always comes with surprises. So in the next 10 years, after I get 5 different degrees to fulfill my parents' expectation, I have decided why not and to build my own academy, because as a resident in Monaco, there aren't that many resources. I wish I can, really communicate with Ms. Chan, Jennifer, with such a big educational platform, but I'm just by myself, alone. So I have set up my own mission statement, how to spread out the Chinese heritage and cultural and art into the Western community. So I actually consider myself as a West East ambassador. So just to share with a little more relaxed personal experience, I had my second master's degree from Columbia University, and it was so difficult because I was writing my thesis while trying to breastfeed my first son, as you can see. And it's one of my most challenging moments, and I feel quite proud that I was able to hold him and get my degree. And to jump to, so back then I was 27. And in responding to your quotation, lifetime learning, I have no secret. At age of 45, thanks for the introduction and recommendation of Judy, I entered Harvard Business School executive program and decided to be a student again. Yes, I think it's quite courageous because I want to have this educational experience and enlightenment from different environments so I can be a role model of my own children. Video, can we do video? Okay, so anyway. Then I will jump into the perspective as a woman entrepreneur. I was born in a jewelry, diamond trade family. However, my spirit is always fell into art and culture and education. So as you could see from the Financial Times and the, I don't know how to point it. Anyway, Financial Times, New York Times, all the article, I actually focus much more in cultural education rather than jewelry itself. I talk about how the museum perspective, how to turn Monet painting into a live canvas. And I talk about how to inspired by our Chinese culture, 5,000 years of history, and use the motif and use the element symbolism from our 中国5000年的历史 into jewelry pieces. So actually my creation are heavily linked to art and museum collections. And to share with you my little international journey, I was able to travel quite a lot. I show two of the little highlight. One is to visit Bhutan. This is a photo with the queen of, actually Empress Huang Taihou, of the king. And we will exchange about the Buddhism, Zhangjiao, Fojiao. And I was very honored to design their national flower, which is opium, Yingsu Hua, as their royal wedding, the current king wedding set with a cultural symbol with their national flower. And the other slide is me with Prince Albert, where I reside in Monaco. We talk about environmental situation and how to make the ocean and all the green world much better. So I will introduce to him about the Li Yao Long Men, the koi jumping over and become dragon. And I feel quite honored that he would spend 5 to 10 minutes listening to me blah, 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 about the Chinese culture, about the symbolism, about the koi. So I participate as a philanthropist with a beautiful stone engraved koi fish to his Prince Albert's Ocean Foundation. And to share with you, I also have this international experience with Hollywood, with a movie star. And the key point is, in addition to the beautiful faces of the best actress, is the element I use into jewelry. How can we? Yeah. So, this is Gwyneth Paltrow on the stage, wearing a fire phoenix element from 火凤凰, from our Tang Dynasty scroll painting. So as you can see, I also put into, for example, Toronto, 杜兰朵, which is an opera created by Puccini, using the Chinese princess element, with a Ru Yi element, and then with the Scarlett Johansson, I talk about the mythical Chinese dragon, 我们的龙腾, and also with Hollywood Swan, that's a earring inspired by Chinese Lin Zhi. So I got quite busy, sure, and then also with Gwyneth Paltrow with our Chinese for gentlemen, Xia Zhu. So I got quite fulfilled to share this educational experience, educational element with a Western client or celebrity or royal member about where I came from, which is China. And I couldn't be more than proud to be a Chinese global citizen. So at the end, I would like to share. Okay. Okay, this is my child. Speaking in mother tongue, French and Russian. As you all know, in Monaco, it's a nation. It's like a United Nations. There are about 140 nationalities, all squeezing in a little village. And my passion and dream is how to represent as a Chinese entrepreneur and as a mom, not only to focus on our Chinese tradition, but also to bridge and link the Western friends together with the Chinese community. So that's why I'm also quite happy and proud to share I represent as a cultural ambassador in Monaco, to really, and having my child, my little one, as a global citizen. Because of the time, so I didn't have the 成语, the example. Hopefully that we can really express ourselves across anywhere in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a testing time for the whole world, apart from the geopolitics and the war, the pandemic, and everything else. But I always believe that the world or an organization or even a person cannot advance with a deficit model. You look at the problems and try to identify problems and to solve the problems, that will not bring you forward, right? We need to have something to look forward to, a vision, something to aspire to. So if I ask a question for both of you, what would you aspire to at this moment?
I think for me, because I'm interested in children and adolescents, I think my aspiration is that we as the adults, as the teachers, as the parents of children, we really promote holistic development of children. We heard Anna talking about more than cognitive. It's transferable skills. We need to build the resilience that we heard Cecilia talking about. So I think really the dream for me is, as adults, as caregivers, as responsible others, we need to promote the all-round development of our children and youth. And actually, if I can just say, UNICEF's Young Envoys program is actually doing that as well. Sorry, I have to give a plug for that.
I totally agree. We call it the 360 degree of education. So to prevent the mistake I had, not having a sport class, being delayed to learn academic, I believe in sports, mental health. For example, my little child have exactly 1 hour per day exercise from tennis, ice skating, ballet, and rhythmic gymnastics. So Monday to Sunday, I put sports as the first activity. And I do see this vibrant spirit that built out of as a child. So, and I will also say education is really the first precious gift that any children can receive from their children. And we are the decision maker of how to build their first stage of mental health and future.
Oh, thank you very much. I've been given the opportunity in 4 international conferences to tell people what have happened in Hong Kong during the pandemic. And I found that we have quite a lot of stories to tell. And that is exactly outside the conventional learning, outside the formal curriculum. And that is something that we have to consolidate and tell ourselves what we are proud of. And when you say post-pandemic, the Chinese translation could be Yik Hao or Hao Yik. And I prefer the latter because it's no longer just post-pandemic is not equal to pre-pandemic. The world is totally changed. Nothing will be the same. It's a new era. And therefore, we have to prepare for a new environment and what they call new normal. And in that, I think, on the one hand, Hong Kong, like NERMRA and UNICEF, is fully aware of what is, not fully aware, but aware of what is happening elsewhere. And that makes Hong Kong very international because we have the window to every part of the world. But on the other hand, we also have to think of how we can contribute. Because what is happening in Hong Kong, quite a number of things are unusual. When most of the other countries, developed countries, are talking about learning laws, we do have some laws, but I don't think this is the discourse in Hong Kong. Teachers are just trying hard. The professionalism demonstrated here is rather unusual. And also I have the feeling that it's no longer possible to compare countries' advancements in education as a correlational thing to their economic strength. And it's a new era. Things are quite different. We can do education regardless of our economic status. We can go on forever, But I know time is limited. Is there anything you want to speak to the audience to bring home?
One sentence. That's hard for an academic. Let's all work together for the good of our children and youth.
Let's transform traditional education to a more innovative, loving, warming spirit to global children.
So thank you very much for this session, and thank you for your patience in listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. And please remain on stage, and let's invite Ms. Judy Chen, Mr. Ivan Chu, and also Mrs. Bonnie Lee to please come on stage and present a certificate to all our panelists and also have a group photo with them.係啦，我要揾我哋嘅大會攝影師，你喺邊度？喺嗰度，好好。Okay, first of all, may I invite all our guests on stage to please have a look at our photographer who's waving hands. Yeah, okay, please have a look. Okay, thank you. And also the friends in front. Thank you very much, Professor Chan, Ms. Hu, and also Professor Rao for your valuable insights. Thank you. And also thank you, Ms. Chan, Mr. Chu, and also Mrs. Lee. Thank you so much. The demand of digital and remote learning was clearly demonstrated nowadays, and it also pinpointed the urgency to develop digital literacy of our children to avoid cyberbullying and crimes. As a resource-abundant society, Hong Kong has an edge in piloting innovative education solutions and share the experience with our frontline educators that how technology can enrich the tangible learning experience in children's education journey. Coming up next is our last panel of the day, Teach Cross-Tech. Let's welcome our host, Legislative Counselor, the Honorable Mr. Duncan Chiu, who has committed to technology and innovation development for nearly 20 years. He is also an influential advocator of local technology and innovation policies and a tech entrepreneur. His panel of 3 distinguished speakers include Professor Stephen Cheng Yan Leung, Mrs. Martha Kasich, and also Professor Nancy Law. For Professor Stephen Cheng Yan Leung is President and Chair Professor of Public Policy of the Education University of Hong Kong. Professor Cheng is highly active in academic research, focusing on corporate governance, corporate social responsibility, and financial market development, and publishes widely in international refereed journals. Mrs. Martha Kasich has published popular bilingual Max and May picture book series, action-packed Panku comic series for children learning Chinese as a second language, and collaborated with UNICEF on the COVID booklet to help children stay safe and smiling during the pandemic. And Professor Nancy Law is Associate Dean Research in the Faculty of Education at the University of Hong Kong. Her team's research on the learning and assessment of digital citizenship has contributed to a better understanding of the threats to and protective factors for students' learning and well-being under COVID-induced school suspensions. Professor Zhang and Mrs. Kasich will join us virtually today. And let's hand over to Honorable Chiu and the panelists. Mr. Chiu, please.
Thank you, MC. Professor Zhang, Professor Law, and also Mrs. Kiswick. Hello, everyone. Good to be here and share with you. I think our topic today is quite timely, talking about teach times tech. I think we have a long data talking about different reimagine the future of education, how we should prepare our generation for the future. And I think pandemic actually dealt us a big challenge in delivering education. And I think technology come in as a big part to help us smoothly, maybe, to actually pass on our teaching experiment and our education experience to our students. But definitely, I think we are just at the beginning stage of having tech and teach blend together. And I think for this first stage, basically we are just leveraging technology to deliver education instead of actually having tech as part of a teaching tool or teaching methodology. So I think that's definitely a lot of things we can discuss in this panel, and I'm sharing you the tech and teach in future. We have 3 experts in this region, and as MC mentioned, I'm not going to duplicate. But one thing I think I want to add before we start is as the tech and innovation representative, I think we are very concerned with how Hong Kong will build into a tech international center, which is one thing in the 14th five-year plan. Central government also leverage us with the role in Hong Kong in building us as a tech center. So how to equip our next generation talents, with technology and tech foundation, tech skill set is definitely one thing that the whole industry, tech industry and the society are greatly concerned of. So how do we prepare them with the tech skill instead of just using tech as a way to deliver education? Could be one thing that we can explore. And we see that in the policy address, from the tech sector, actually, for your information, we did send in a lot of suggestions in grooming our next future leaders. And having a stronger foundation in technology skill set is one thing we wrote to the CE, and we were happy in the policy address. It was included that in the primary school and secondary school, we will add a STEAM coordinator with the government's initiative to build more teaching method or teaching team into schools to deliver that. So that's one thing we might also go into a bit later. But now, to start with the panel, I would like to invite our 3 specialists, our 3 professionals, to share with us their thoughts and their experience in the tech and teach sector. First, I would like to invite Mrs. Martha Kiswick and to share with us the COPE, the COPE initiative with Learning Passport. Martha is online now. Possibly we can start with the screen share for you. Please, Martha.
Can you see my screen?
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you, Honourable Chu, and thank you to UNICEF for giving me this opportunity to present COPE at the Reimagine Education Forum. So good morning from the UK to everybody. Good evening in Hong Kong, good afternoon. My name is Martha and I'm the author and creator of the COPE series. I'm just going to give you a brief overview about COPE and our epic journey before highlighting our collaboration with UNICEF and in particular the Learning Passport, which is UNICEF's online platform powered by Microsoft. So COPE is a series of, can you see my screen? Is it moving forwards?
Do you need us to help on the, okay, let me do that. Yep.
It doesn't.
Okay, just let me know. I think I have to control it from here.
Okay.
Can you see the screen?
Okay, great, cool.
Okay.
Yep, I can see it. Can you go to the slide 1 again? Okay, yeah, so go to slide 2. Thank you. That's great. So next slide, please. So COPE is a series of beautifully illustrated non-for-profit children's books aimed to increase the disaster resilience of children wherever they are. We cover natural hazards ranging from floods to earthquakes, wildfires to cyclones, and the books provide coping tools, preparedness, with fun and relatable stories. Cope is illustrated by award-winning artist Mariko Jesse and is edited by Singapore University of Social Sciences disaster risk reduction expert, Dr. Timothy Sim. So next slide, please. So the COPE concept. So the plots all start at the COPE Academy, an international disaster hub set up by a Grand Mistress Fu hidden deep in Sichuan province. The COPE squad, Candy, Ollie, Ping, and Eddie are teenage orphans who have been plucked out of their care homes to live at the COPE Academy and be trained up as disaster risk reduction agents. Next slide, please. So the squad fly off to disaster-prone areas, and in each mission, a hazard will occur, and the COPE squad have to put their disaster risk reduction skills into action. So in Mexico, there's an earthquake, drop, cover, hold. In Japan, a tsunami, get up to high ground. In Indonesia, a volcano, listen, prepare, stay aware. In Paris, a heat wave, stay cool and hydrated. And in China, a drought, every drop counts. Next slide, please. So what's quite cool about COPE is that it encourages awareness of vulnerable members of the community. So the elderly, those living in poverty, and obviously not forgetting pets and other animals to ensure a safe and swift evacuation. So leave no one behind. And since Eddie, who's one of the COPE squad and is from Brazil, he is hearing impaired. So the COPE series creatively integrates LSB, which is the Libra sign language, across the narrative through an ongoing partnership with the University of Brazil to check the accuracy of all these LSB signs. The children's rights perspective within COPE has all been carefully vetted by UNICEF, East Asia and Pacific. Next slide, please. So COPE collaborates with global organizations such as World Vision, United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction, United Nations Majority Group of Children and Youth. And our scientific advisors are Hong Kong Observatory and the World Meteorological Organization. In fact, COPE just hosted a side event at the WMO Pavilion at COP27 entitled Be Ready for Disasters, Empower Future Generations with Practical Knowledge in DRR. So we believe we're reaching about 3 million kids worldwide today. We've been translated into about 15 different languages, and we're distributed in 25 countries, and the list is growing. Next slide, please. So all the content within the COPE books has been carefully vetted by leading DRR experts in the field, from Oxford, Stirling, Durham, or James Cook University. The books have all been contextualized for different countries, and the translated versions include English, traditional and simplified Chinese, Spanish, Portuguese, Nepali, Filipino, Malay, Thai, Vietnamese. And unlike other similar initiatives, COPE is free of charge. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thanks. So dissemination. The books, the physical books, are all disseminated through DRR educational projects in the field, in schools and clubs across the world. For example, UNICEF Hong Kong held DRR workshops in Cantonese to promote the Stay Safe and Smiling message in the COVID booklet. World Vision translated the Landslides book into Nepali to reach children living in rural communities. 42,000 books were printed, with teachers, parents, and volunteers all being trained up in DRR. Next slide, please. So our website hosts the books and short animated trailers, and they're all available online and free to be downloaded as flipbooks. And the website is colourful, interactive, and fun. So we try and get kids to access to download all this free content. Next slide, please. So with our collaboration with the Learning Passport, we began this back in January, at the beginning of January 2022. So the UNICEF Learning Passport is an online, mobile and offline tech platform which enables high quality, flexible learning. It provides free education for children and youth and teachers around the world, especially for those who have been affected by crisis. The COPE Learning Passport collaboration helps young learners to be prepared and navigate disasters, as well as to understand the impact of climate change in their own communities, as well as globally. The Learning Passport has so far been formatted and uploaded COPE content onto 8 different instances, which include the Global Digital Library and other platforms in Timor-Leste, Lebanon, Sierra Leone, Egypt, and the East Asia and the Regional Hub, as well as the Learning Passport Global Digital Library. Next slide, please. To other online platforms where COPE has been uploaded is the UNDRR Prevention Web, which is a platform to share knowledge for disaster risk reduction and resilience. COPE has featured on this global platform since 2019, where we teamed up with the UNDRR to produce a booklet to commemorate World Tsunami Awareness Day. Next slide, please. So We Adapt has also done a brilliant job at uploading COPE onto their collaborative platform, which focuses on climate change adaptation issues. It allows practitioners, researchers, and policymakers to access credible, high quality, informative, and connect with one another online. And next slide, please. So the World Meteorological Organization also has an innovative platform which features conference and expert reports, working papers, journals, and newsletters, and information dossiers on weather. We've just received word that the WMO will be translating all 10 COPE books and will translate them into the 5 UN languages to upload onto their platform. So these languages will include Russian, Chinese, English, Spanish, French, and Arabic. And we believe this reach will be huge. Next slide, please. So digital education, COPE is being developed using more digital programs. So at the moment, the COPE characters are being brought alive through the creation of audiobooks, with the Droughts book in Arabic recently being developed by the UNICEF Learning Passport team in Egypt. Next slide, please. Also available in audiobook format is Wildfires in Spanish, which has been developed by IARD, which is the International Argentinian Response Disaster Risk Reduction Institute. So they will be translating all of the books into Spanish to be used as audiobooks. Next slide, please. So future plans for COPE. We want to continue our mission of providing free and creative DRR educational content for all children globally. We'd like to translate more books into more languages for online distribution and offline projects on the ground. We'd like to produce more COPE digital content, such as the app which we're just developing with the university in the Czech Republic, Masaryk University, which will have interactive play to reinforce disaster preparedness. And we're also working with the 10 company in Singapore to produce animated jingles with these key DRR messages to be disseminated globally, either online, offline, TV, or on the radio. So thank you. Moving to the next slide, please, which really just says thank you so much for listening to everybody, and again to UNICEF for allowing me the chance to present at this forum. And please do reach out if you'd like to get involved with COPE, or if you have any ideas for us. We are very flexible, and we're always up for new collaborations and finding key ways to get these key instructional messages out to kids all over the world and be prepared for disasters. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Martha. That's definitely a wonderful initiative to promote disaster awareness for children. And we might jump in for a question for that before we do that at the end. I think you have done some, because our panel is about teaching tech. So you did some digitization of the teaching materials and broadcasting in different part of the world. Any further step? Because I've seen the showcase you have, like the disasters awareness. Maybe we can do more work on tech. Let's say the digital experience about what earthquake is like with VR. So students can young kids can actually say, hey, how do we prepare for that if there's an earthquake and stuff? So move them to simulate a drought situation in Saudi Arabia, where kids in Hong Kong have no experience of. You have any plans like that?
Well, I think that would be an amazing idea, and it would be really interesting to team up with one of the big animators to really try and bring these messages. The first project that we're working on at the moment is the jingles, which we're working on with a company in Singapore called the Teng Foundation. And they'll be producing 30-second animated jingles, which will just be promoting the key messages to remember should a disaster occur, such as drop, cover, hold for earthquakes, or get up to high ground for tsunami. So these will just be 30-second animated jingles, which will be then disseminated out to different countries, hopefully through governments, to then use on TV or radio, or just short, sharp messages for kids to remember in that split second.
Okay, great.
So that's our latest kind of plan.
Thank you. Looking forward to that. So before we have these teaching materials, of course, we have to have students' awareness in tech, in educations. And with better preparation of the kids in school, we definitely need tech-savvy teachers, right? So the digital literacy, not just for kids, but for our teaching team, is important. So next, I would like to introduce Professor Stephen Cheung. He's the president of Education U of Hong Kong. So I think we would like to have Professor Cheung to share with us on the how to enhance students' and teachers' digital literacy. So please, Professor.
Oh, thank you, Honorable Ji. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
I would like to start by thanking the organizer for including me on this distinguished panel. Next slide, please. As an economist, I've been always thinking about an important question: how we can enhance Hong Kong's future competitiveness. Our next generation need to be competitive. This implies Hong Kong needs an education system to nurture a competitive new generation. In my view, we need to strengthen 3 elements in our education system in order to do that. These elements are innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. In Chinese, we refer to 3個創: 創新、創意同埋創業. Next slide, please. As the president of a university, I welcome government investment in enhancing our research capacities. As a result, Hong Kong universities rank very high in the global university rankings. However, we should also be mindful that the importance of investing in our foundation education system. Next slide, please. In my view, innovative education should start as early as possible, and more importantly, in a fun manner. We have been talking about STEM, STEAM, STREAM. It doesn't matter which one we're going after. STEM, STEAM, STREAM, doesn't matter. But don't forget, the curriculum should be cross-disciplined, interesting, and last but not the least, relevant to our daily lives that the student should be able to understand easily. Next slide, please. Otherwise, students will lose interest in studying science subjects. The consequence is less and less students in Hong Kong choose science subjects in their studies. For example, in 2022, less than 30% of Hong Kong high school graduates took biologies, and less than 20% took physics in the exit exam we call DSE in Hong Kong. What is happening now is that our university has top scientists doing excellent research, but at the same time teaching a group not so top students in either faculties of science or faculties of engineering. Next slide. What Education University has been doing. Education University has been involving in a project called Cool Thing at JC, sponsored by the Hong Kong Jockey Club Charity Trust during the past 5 years. In short, we train our primary school students to use IT as a solution to solve their daily life problems. Some of these kids, primary school kids, have learned how to write apps, simple apps. So far, we have supported 170 Hong Kong primary schools, account for approximately 40% of all Hong Kong primary schools, over 1,000 teachers, and 80,000 students. Next slide, please. Another important dimension is to make sure we have upgraded the capacities of our teachers. My university has been offering coding education and AI literacy to our students, future teachers in Hong Kong, as elective subjects. Of course, I do not expect all teachers who teach coding education or AI, but they should know what they are. Next slide. To conclude, you can do more in promoting AI literacy, not only school children, people like us as well, or teachers. I hope they should know what coding or AI is. More important, to have the capacity to embrace new technologies in their teachings to enhance their students' learning experience. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Zhang. Couldn't agree with you more. You know, there's a lot of work we have to do on training our professionals, teachers, and students. And you know, so far we have like around 30 to 40,000 in Hong Kong that actually works in tech research-related works. We have a big gap in tech talent. So according to our secretary, I think we need 100,000 more. So there's a big gap in talent for us to actually build a talent economy or building us as an international technology hub. There's a long way to go. So there's a lot of work at university we have to put more emphasis on. And I agree with you, the 3 points that you raised, 創生創意創業, right? So we spend a lot of effort on promoting entrepreneurship in the last few years in universities. There's a lot of competitions and mentorship. We have some investment schemes encouraging students to start a company, know what is a startup and have a startup experience. But have we actually increased their skill set, their tech and innovation capability? Is that something you can comment on the free 創新創業創意? Are there areas we are lacking behind, or you think we are on, what else can we do more?
Well, thank you for your question. I think we need the ecosystem. The ecosystem simply is not there. When you mentioned about our tech industry in Hong Kong, we have a shortage of tech personnel. But the way I look at it is ecosystem not only on the output side, it's also on the input side. Input side including the primary school, secondary school, and university. We need a system that would educate our kids in terms of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship as soon as possible, as early as possible. This is the way I'm looking at it. So we need to build that ecosystem. And for a short answer, I think we are lagging behind, in terms of our innovative education comparing with other economies.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Totally agree. I think in primary and secondary, there's still a lot of work we have to do. And I think we have to do more in keeping our talent in Hong Kong as well. Actually, we train a lot of tech talents. We always talk about the 18 unicorns, et cetera, built from Hong Kong or built by Hong Kong. But most of these students, they graduate and then they build a company elsewhere. So, whether we can keep our talent in Hong Kong after graduation is also something we have to do more. That's why we promoted the government to have these new office in bringing in research companies and tech companies into Hong Kong with our Northern Territories, and building more research or high-end tech functions and tech functional jobs in Hong Kong. And yeah, pardon me, I always go off script. You will know me if you've seen me being a moderator. So let's go to our third speaker, Professor Nancy Law. We talk about the some learning initiative from MAFA and then from the university's angle. And now let's go to digital learning. Professor Law is experts in this area and with the interaction digital learning. So maybe we'll let Professor Law introduce your work on this.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon, and it's my pleasure to be invited to this very meaningful Reimagine Education Forum. In fact, I find the keynote and the panels very inspiring. Yes. So this panel is titled Teach Cross Tech. To me, why do we want to teach? We want children to learn, but teaching is not equal to learning. We might teach, but children may not learn. So we need to know how people learn, and learning needs air. That means the learner has to be active, has to be interactive. The interactivity could be with the learning resources, but much, much more importantly, we are people, we need social interactions. We hear so much about the social, emotional health, mental health. So without interactivity, we cannot learn well. And then learning has to be reflective. We need to think about why we learn, what have we learned, how have we learned, and if we don't succeed, how do we overcome the situation? So if learning needs air, then we need the learner to have the agency, and then social learning. So what does it mean for learning technology? Then the learning technology has to empower learners and connect learners with peers and the wider community. So because we really want to understand how children learn, particularly now that we are in the digital age, we are not training robots. And how children, we all know that children's growth and development depends on their environment, the social, physical, and digital environment now. And with the changing digital environment, how are children's development affected? So we had a very, we were able to get funding, a 5-year funding project from the Research Grants Council in Hong Kong to do a theme-based research to solve to address the grand challenge of understanding and improving the development of digital citizenship in a multifaceted manner. So we had, the core was a longitudinal study, and the dates may be a little bit important. So when we designed the study, we had no idea about COVID, And the first round of data collection was completed in the first half of 2019. And then the second study data collection was in April to August 2021. And when we analyze the first round of data, we find that digital divide is more than access to digital technology. It includes digital competence and also family support in the digital aspect. And then digital literacy is in fact a protective factor for digital well-being against internet addiction and cyberbullying. And I've not had much experience of being chased to do more research until after that report was published. And then people ask us, what should we do? I mean, we really have a very supportive community. And I said, well, we need more research because, I mean, all I can say without more data, it's just quite intuitive. But what have happened, in terms of children? So we actually was pushed to do more research. And the first round of data collection was in June to July 2020. So that was just after the first and second wave. And then we had one earlier this year. And we were doing the study on what we call e-citizen education 360. It was what we call an action-oriented community action. Actually, if you notice, there were a lot of organizations, educational and social organizations, plus charities that actually supported our work. And so we found that digital competence divide actually increased during the 2+ years of pandemic. And then community support was found to be the most positive factor during the pandemic. This was reported by both the school leaders and teachers. And then the digital divide in parenting was in fact also quite prominent, and particularly for the adolescents. Parents of adolescents found it very challenging. And digital literacy as a protective factor, again, was reported in both rounds. And then the school e-learning organization strategies and collaborative culture actually matters a lot. We hear about, okay, so the family SES is important, but in fact, we found that, say, if you were a child from a disadvantaged family, but your school, the average SES is high, the child with the low SES is not disadvantaged. But a child in, well, even if you come from a high SES, if your school's average SES is low, the whole school is affected. So I think these are the kinds of things that we really need to understand more. And I was reporting on the work that we have done in Hong Kong. But in fact, there were quite a number of global projects that also had similar findings. Say one of them is the DigiGen, which is a European project funded by the Horizon 2020. They started actually in January 2020 and just finishing this month. And I happen to be on the International Advisory Panel. And we find that, they find that in fact, the digital divide is also prominent, even within the European countries, within and across the countries. And then they also find that integrating the digital technology into families is important. So they have this term, doing family. Family is not just, a static thing. So you have to nurture it. And having the digital activities within the family members, in fact, is important to support the child. And also, there is an important part about children's digital rights. the digital rights to be protected, but also to be empowered through the use of technology. Another very well-known project is the Global Kids Online, and they're also very keen on the children's rights in the digital age. For the children without access to the digital technology, they in fact cannot survive the challenges that well through the pandemic. But at the same, and also they can also be developing new skills. But at the same time, there's also the risk. So how do we protect children, both at the system level and also at the individual level is important. And again, the the same three themes comes through. So I started by saying that learning needs air. And so if we talk about technology, we need not only the technology platform, but beyond, we need the social platform. We need the social connection. So this is one of the projects that we have ongoing within our Faculty of Education. And it's in fact, it's called InSTEM, Integrated STEM Education for schools. We believe in, not if children were to be learning, to be 21st century citizens, to have creativity, to have critical thinking and collaboration and communication, the classroom have to change. That means how teachers teach needs to change. How do teachers learn? And the way the school organizations go has to change, including staffing, including the infrastructure, but also including the curriculum and even simple things like the timetabling. So that means things have to be evolving, emerging. And so we believe about learning across all levels, from the child to the teachers, to the school leader, and to the school. The school's changing, their regular routines is also a way of the school learning. So we were very proud to see the schools that we have been working with really flourishing. Kai Ming earlier was saying that, the schools were the teachers are very brave, and I think Nirmala was also saying the same. We have been working with the teachers, and I have to say, I want to say kudos to all our teachers and school leaders. They've done so much. So I think that's the end, and I would just want to say, if we want technology to work, we need to focus on learning. Learning is social, and it is a design issue that we need to pay attention to, otherwise it won't work. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Nancy. And can I just quickly ask you one further on question, with your studies? I see that in your study, in the background you said you study throughout the COVID period, the well-being of students.
Yes.
Do you think a big demise, or how do you think the students' well-being were during COVID, or how does it impact them?
Okay, well, I would say, because we actually had we had 4 rounds of data collection. So one was the first half of 2019, and then we had one 2020, 2021, and then also one 2022. So we were comparing particularly, because the 2020 and the 2022 data were on the same instrument design. And we find that, in fact, the students' well-being indicators actually improved. The mean level improved, and also, in fact, we also find that the students' digital literacy, because we measure the digital literacy, also overall improved. But there was increased diversity. So that means there's some, say, just digital literacy. The same child, over 2 years, actually some of them actually had lowered digital literacy, but some others had much higher. So that means we need to think about, say, for those children who actually learn less, why have they learned less? They're actually less able than before. And I think some of the things that we hear from the teachers and the parents and the school leaders is that it's the social emotional side, because the cognitive learning and the social emotional learning cannot be differentiated. And so we find that, so we've been also working with school partners and also some of the social work agencies to try and look for ways to support children. And so I think one of the things that we really want, the government to be able to do more is support parenting, particularly digital parenting. Yeah.
Thank you. I think these are very important findings, and I think the COVID gave us a test ground to actually, trial all these ways of delivering education in future. And I think these findings are really important. We should actually study that further and just get ready for the next wave. So far that, when people are getting so Zoom fatigue today, and luckily we're going back to physical meetings and educations a bit. But I think we have to get ready for that. Time is up. I don't have time to add too much on that, but I think definitely we are supposed to talk a bit more on the tech side. I thought I would be supposed to fill that in. There's a lot of work we have to do in tech and teach. We have to better prepare our kids for the future. I think like Professor Zhang mentioned, and the teaching effort and the teaching staff force, there's still a lot of work we have to do. So thank you UNICEF for hosting this event. I think definitely this is things we can keep on having further discussion in future. Thank you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you all, and especially thanks to Mother and also Professor Zhang. And please remain online for a group photo. And also, may I now invite Ms. Julie Chan, Mr. Ivan Chu, and also Mrs. Bonnie Lee to please come on stage to a group photo. And once again, thank you, Honorable Chu, and also Professor Law. And for Professor Zhang and also Mrs. Casey, we'll post the certificates shortly afterwards to you. Thank you again for supporting today's forum. So now, first of all, I would like to invite Martha and also Professor Zhang to please look right into your camera. And our guests on stage, please have a look at our photographer in the middle. Yes. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you. And once again, thank you, Mother, and thank you, Professor Zhang. Thank you so much for your precious time. Thank you. Thank you. And also thank you, Honorable Chu, and also Professor Law. Thank you so much. Since the establishment of Hong Kong Committee for UNICEF in 1986, we are proud to have achieved many important milestones to protect the rights of every child. From Hong Kong's largest charity road running race, UNICEF Charity Run, to timely COVID relief initiatives, and of course, a wide range of education and youth programs, all of the achievements would not be possible without the steadfast support of our donors, our corporate partners, volunteers, and also colleagues. Near the end of today's forum, let's have a quick review of what UNICEF Hong Kong has accomplished to advance the rights and well-being for our next generation. Every child we love. Thank you for over 3 decades of your unwavering support. UNICEF Hong Kong will continue to do our best to create a brighter future for every child everywhere. So ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's forum. On behalf of our host, the Hong Kong Committee for UNICEF, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to our honorable guests, distinguished speakers, and also all of you for joining us this afternoon. So I would like to invite you all for one last big round of applause for our speakers and our guests, and also all of you. Thank you so much. And for the time being, I would like to invite our guests and also speakers to leave first. 所以在这个时候呢，我们先请我们的讲者可以先离开我们的会场，谢谢。And also I would like to remind our guests to please return your SI headphones and receiver to our SI counter. 喺呢個時候，我亦都有請大家咧，就係將我哋嘅即時傳譯機咧，可以放翻喺我哋外面 SI counter。在这个时候呢，也有请大家把你们的即时传译机可以放回去我们大会外面这个 SI counter. So once again,